I woke up gasping for air in some rundown straw hut, completely lost. Last thing I remember, I was fishing, and then I fell into the river. But this place? Definitely not where I came from. Before I could figure anything out, someone outside started yelling my name. Jenner, the government matchmaking team is here handing out wives. That's when a flood of memories hit me. Memories that weren't mine. I'd crossed over into another world. This was the Liang Dynasty, a land torn apart by war, bandits, and corrupt officials. Everything was falling apart. The man calling me was my uncle, Luzhiny, a tall, fierce-looking former soldier with a bad leg from his army days. He'd been taking care of me ever since my parents were killed by bandits 5 years ago. He told me to hurry up before all the good women were taken. Turns out, the country lost so many people to war that the government forced every man over 18 to accept a wife or face heavy taxes, forced labor, even conscription. The local officials here didn't even know the dynasty had already collapsed. They were still following the old orders. Back in my previous life, marrying someone cost a fortune. Here, they were literally giving wives away for free. We got to the village entrance, but we were too late. Every unmarried man had already picked someone. All that was left were 2 skinny sisters and a widow with a little girl. The 3 women dropped to their knees begging me to take them. The sisters said they'd been rejected at every village for being too thin. If nobody picked them, they'd be sold to a brothel. The widow said her husband died in the war and she and her daughter couldn't survive alone anymore. I felt torn, and honestly, they were all pretty in their own way. Then, right in that moment, a voice rang out inside my head. Some kind of system activated, calling itself the Population Prosperity Warlord system. It said I'd get rewards for adding family members or expanding my power. Wives counted too. That settled it. I told the officials I'd take all 3. The whole village went silent. My uncle lost it. He grabbed at me, cursing, saying I was out of my mind. 1 wife was hard enough to feed, and now I wanted 3 women plus a child? He was sure we'd all starve. But the official practically jumped out of his seat, shoved the marriage papers in my face, and had me stamp my fingerprint before anyone could stop it. Uncle stormed off in a rage. The villagers shook their heads, convinced our family was finished. But the 3 women knelt again, tearfully thanking me, swearing they'd work hard to repay me. In my old life, I never got to choose. This time around, things would be different. I told the 3 women to get up and led them home. Along the way, the older village women teased me about having 3 wives at once. I just laughed it off. I asked their names. The 2 sisters were Jiang He and Jiang Miao. The widow was Li Wan Yang, and her little girl was called Nguan Wan. When we got to my small courtyard, I sent them to the kitchen to cook while I cleaned up my parents' old room. I told them to use plenty of grain. We needed full bellies tonight. The sisters blushed bright red at that, clearly thinking about what happens on a wedding night. I couldn't help but smile. Ancient girls were really something. Back in the room, I opened the system. I asked about my reward for adding 3 wives, but the system told me it only counts when the marriage is real, not just on paper. Fair enough. I cracked open the starter gift pack and nearly lost my mind. I got a personal storage space with unlimited capacity, a jar of 2,000 Tiger Yang pills that each give the strength of a tiger, master-level cold weapon skills, a full set of steel weapons, master-level hunting abilities, and a modern military crossbow with infinite bolts. All because my identity here was a hunter. I swore right then. In my past life, I was a workhorse. This time, I'd live exactly how I wanted. I swallowed 1 pill immediately. My whole body burned like fire was spreading through my veins. The pain was brutal, but passed quickly. Afterward, I felt incredible, light, sharp, powerful. I was sure I could punch a bull to death. But there was also a strange, restless heat in my gut that was hard to suppress. When I came out, I noticed a big sack of grain on the table. Wan Yang told me Uncle had come by while I was in the room. He didn't say a word, just left the grain and walked out. That hit me hard. I'd made him furious this afternoon, yet he still brought food. He truly cared. Then little Nguan Wan tugged her mother's sleeve, saying she was hungry. Wan Yang scolded her for being rude, but I picked the girl up. She was so light it hurt my heart. Wan Yang softened and told her to call me Daddy. The little one looked up at me shyly and whispered, Daddy. It was the first time in both my lives anyone called me that. I secretly crushed 1 Tiger Yang pill into the wheat porridge so everyone could share a tiny dose. When I served each of them a full, thick bowl, They almost couldn't believe it. They said usually only men doing heavy labor got the thick porridge. Women only got watery soup. They started crying while eating. I pretended not to notice. After the meal, they all felt strange. The exhaustion had vanished from their bodies, and they felt unusually warm. That was the pill working, but I kept quiet about it. When night came, the three women sat with flushed faces, waiting for me to decide the sleeping arrangements. I sent the sisters to the other room with Wan. They looked relieved, but also a little disappointed. Wanyang stayed behind, brought a basin of water, and offered to wash me, her voice barely a whisper. After I finished, I grabbed her hand and told her it was her turn now. She protested. A husband serving his wife was unheard of. I just told her to listen. Outside, the spring night was alive with the sound of insects. It was spring, after all. Everything was coming back to life. Half an hour after my first night with Wanyang, the system chimed in with rewards. I got 10 acres of farmland with rice, corn, potato seeds, and more, 10 young livestock including cows, horses, and pigs with unlimited feed, plus 10 more tiger yang pills and 500 points that unlocked a point shop. The shop was packed with weapons and armor, spears, swords, shields, full cavalry gear, all at different prices. It was basically a mobile armory. I planted all the seeds right away. The system showed they'd take 120 days to mature. After browsing the shop a bit, I closed my eyes and slept through my first full night in this world. Next morning, I grabbed the old hunting bow my original body's father had left behind and headed for the mountains. My wives looked worried. They knew the hills were full of wild beasts and bandits now that most hunters were gone. I told them not to worry and left humming a little tune. My plan was simple. The dynasty had fallen, and news would reach our remote county within weeks. I had no idea what would happen then, so I needed to hunt, sell meat, stock up grain, and get settled fast. Up in the mountains, I pulled out my military crossbow. The thing was incredible, full modern kit, even infrared sights. I tracked a wild boar to a water hole using scent, droppings, and prints, then put a bolt straight through its skull from 30 meters. The beast thrashed around, even with an arrow in its brain, so I pinned it down and finished it with a knife to the throat. Around 200 pounds of pork, stored straight into my space. I kept going and heard deer calls. Found a buck and doe in the middle of mating. I watched for a bit, purely educational, then shot the buck in the head. But at the exact same moment, an arrow from somewhere else hit the doe. Someone else was out here. Both deer bolted. I chased and dropped the buck with 2 more shots to its front legs. Then movement came from the trees. 5 men stepped out, armed with swords and bows. 3 of them wearing tattered army uniforms. Not hunters, bandits. They told me to leave the deer and walk away. But right then the system popped up with a quest. Wipe out the Black Wind Stronghold bandits, the same ones who killed my original body's parents. The reward was a legendary blade technique called the Proud Cold 6 Strikes, 10 growth acceleration cards for crops and livestock, 1,000 points, and 10 tiger yang pills. I recognized that technique. It was Niafeng's famous massive blade art. I had to have it. Problem was, the stronghold had over 100 bandits. These 5 were just a scouting party. I played weak, apologized, and turned to leave. Just as I expected, the second my back was turned, 2 arrows slammed into the tree I'd already dodged behind. Before they could reload, I sent a bolt clean through one bandit's neck. The rest panicked and tried to run. One stayed back with his bow to cover the retreat, but I peeked around the tree, shot him, then rolled clear of his arrow and chased down the other 3. With my maxed-out hunting skills, they were just prey. I dropped them all. It was my first time killing people. My hands were shaking and my heart was pounding, but I felt more excited than sick. In a world like this, being soft meant being dead. I was fine with that. I collected the 2 deer and was about to deal with the bodies when I heard a branch snap on the slope behind me. A wave of animal scent hit me, and every alarm in my body went off. I spun around and saw the most terrifying sight of my life. A massive white-browed tiger with blazing eyes, jaws wide open, slowly emerging from the ridge above me. My scalp went numb and my heart nearly exploded. When I finally saw the full size of that tiger, I broke out in cold sweat. 3 meters long, at least 500 pounds, nothing like the zoo tigers from my old life. Pure killing machine. Before I could even react, it lunged. The impact was like getting hit by a boulder. It pinned me down with one massive paw, claws digging into my chest. I screamed in pain and grabbed its neck with both hands, fighting with everything I had to keep those jaws away from my throat. Thanks to the Tiger Yang pill, my arms had enough power to hold it back. We were locked in a deadlock, neither side giving in. Then it hit me, my storage space. I shouted, "Store," and the entire tiger vanished off my chest, sucked right into the space. I collapsed flat on the ground, shaking uncontrollably. That was the closest I'd ever come to dying. After catching my breath, I checked my wounds. Not too deep, luckily. I popped another pill, and the pain faded quickly. But when I looked inside my storage space, that tiger was going berserk, ripping apart my wild boar. I cursed and pulled all my game out before it destroyed everything. To calm the beast down, I tossed the 5 bandit corpses in instead. Turns out dead people can go into the space just fine. Pretty handy for hiding bodies. With the tiger fed and my storage space occupied, I had to carry the game home myself. I cut a pole, tied up the boar and 2 deer with vines, and hauled it all down the mountain. With 2 pills worth of strength now, 600 or 700 pounds was manageable. When I got near the village, the farmers in the fields lost their minds. They couldn't believe scrawny little me was carrying all that on my shoulders. The uncles and neighbors rushed over, talking over each other, asking where I got it all and how I was so strong. They grabbed more poles and helped carry everything to my house. Word reached Uncle fast. He came running, and the first thing he did was check me for injuries. I was covered in blood, mostly from the animals, and I kept him away from my chest so he wouldn't see the claw marks. I told him it was all animal blood. He believed me, and the relief on his face was obvious. With no children of his own, I was the only one left to carry on the family name. I showed him my strength by casually lifting a 300 to 400 pound boulder nearby. His jaw dropped. He said that kind of power matched a third-rate military general from his army days. In the old Liang military ranking, third-rate generals could fight 50 men alone, and it only got crazier from there. A super first-rate general could take on 3,000 soldiers solo. Uncle glanced at my wives with a strange look and muttered something about the wedding night working wonders. I changed the subject before he could dig deeper. I asked the village butchers, Uncle Yukai and Uncle Yu Qing, to help process the game. Nothing went to waste. Meat, organs, hides, all of it. I kept a chunk of pork and the organs for a wedding feast and planned to sell the rest. I invited every uncle and aunt in the village to bring their bowls and come eat that evening. Everyone cheered. Meat was a rare treat in times like these. My 3 wives watched me from the edge of the crowd, eyes full of warmth. Uncle pulled me aside and demanded to know how I got so strong. I'd already prepared my answer. I told him it must have been the luck of the wedding night. After all, I woke up this morning feeling like a different person. He stared at my wives again, clearly not fully buying it, but I dodged away before he could press further. The whole village buzzed with excitement that afternoon as everyone pitched in. But 3 miles away, a local landlord named Chao Wang heard about my haul. The man was used to just taking whatever he wanted. He immediately sent his men to come seize all the game for himself. Chao Wang was the biggest landowner around. His nephew was the county magistrate's deputy, so nobody could touch him. He owned almost every piece of land near our village and charged 70% rent, way above normal. Whatever he wanted, he took. Women, valuables, anything. People hated him but were too scared to speak up. Right in the middle of our feast preparations, his head steward, Wang, showed up with 5 or 6 thugs, acting smug. He demanded we hand over all the game meat, said his master wanted it. Uncle stepped forward and told him if Chao Wang wanted meat, he could pay for it. Wang sneered and threatened to raise everyone's rent another 10% if we didn't cooperate. That would basically mean farming for free. The villagers were furious but helpless. Wang openly admitted he was robbing us and dared anyone to do something about it. That's when the system chimed in with 2 choices. Option 1, hand over the meat and earn a, swallowed my pride, title. Option 2, kill landlord Chao Wang. Earn the Overlord Spear technique, an acceleration card, 100 points, and a Tiger Yang pill. Easy choice. I went inside, came back carrying a whole deer, and the steward's face lit up. Before he could finish thanking me, I hurled the entire deer at him from 10 meters away. It slammed into him and sent him flying, blood pouring from his mouth. His men were horrified. They pointed at me screaming about attempted murder, but I just whistled and said he asked for the game and didn't catch it. Not my problem. They were too terrified of my strength to fight back. They grabbed their broken steward and ran. The village elders panicked. They said Chao Wang's nephew had once beaten a man to death for a smaller offense. They begged me to run while I could, but I couldn't do that. If I left, these good people would pay the price. Besides, I'd already accepted the quest. No backing down now. I told everyone to sit and eat, then quietly slipped away from the feast. I made it to Chao Wang's estate, just as his men arrived carrying the injured steward, crying and begging their master for revenge. Chao Wang flew into a rage and ordered everyone to gear up. He sent a servant to fetch his nephew from the government office, wanting official muscle to come crush me. I ambushed that servant as he came around the corner. One quick twist of his neck, dead instantly, no suffering. Then I crept to the front gate and listened. Chao Wang was rallying his 10 remaining men, bragging that no matter how strong I was, numbers were on his side. I smiled and checked my storage space. The tiger was still in there, furious as ever, pacing and roaring. It had barely touched the bandit corpses I fed it, just shredded them to pieces. That beast was pure rage. Perfect. I had a helper who didn't need any convincing. I released the tiger right inside Chao Wang's front gate. A deafening roar split the night. People in nearby villages slammed their doors and windows shut. Chao Wang and his men froze like statues when they saw a massive white-browed tiger materialize in front of them. Several thugs fainted on the spot. The tiger locked onto the nearest target, Chao Wang himself, and lunged straight at him, jaws wide open. The tiger didn't give Chao Wang a chance to even scream. One swipe of its claws ripped his chest open, then it clamped down on his neck and snapped it like a twig. He was dead instantly. The system confirmed the kill and gave me the Overlord Spear technique, an acceleration card, 1 Tiger Yang pill, and 100 points. I could have left right then, but the tiger was my responsibility. If it escaped into another village, innocent people would die. So I stayed and watched from the gate as it tore through the entire courtyard. The dozen or so thugs didn't stand a chance. Their screams filled the night until one by one they went silent. When the tiger finally calmed down, I called to it from the doorway. Bad idea. It spun around, drenched in blood, and launched itself at me. But I was ready this time. I dodged sideways and stored it back into my space before it even landed. I glanced at the mess of limbs and bodies on the ground, nodded to myself, and headed home whistling. Back at the village, almost everyone had left. Uncle gave me a strange look. Years on the battlefield had made his nose sharp, and I'm sure he could smell blood on me. He'd been suspicious of me since yesterday. I could tell he was probably thinking about finding some fortune teller to check if I was possessed. After everyone left, Jiang He, the older sister, brought hot water and offered to help me wash. When I took off my shirt, she spotted the claw marks on my chest from the tiger attack, and her face filled with worry. I told her it was nothing and asked her to keep it secret. Then I pulled her close. She blushed and apologized for her younger sister Miao being too shy to come first. I just laughed and said there was no rush. They'd both be mine eventually. Afterward, the system chimed again with upgraded rewards: 20 acres of farmland, 20 livestock, 20 Tiger Yang pills, and 1,000 points. The rewards had doubled from last time. My storage space was starting to look like a small farm. At this rate, I'd have 1,000 acres before long. With that much land and food, I could rally an army just by waving my hand. Once Jiang He fell asleep, I finally opened the Overlord Spear technique. The first page said it was created by Xiang Yu, the hegemon king of Western Shu, the fiercest warrior in 5,000 years of Chinese history. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. The technique was incredible. Every move burned itself into my memory after a single read. In my mind, I could see a towering figure spinning a spear with devastating power, each strike more overwhelming than the last. I couldn't sit still. I grabbed my steel spear from the storage space, solid steel, 3 meters long, 50 or 60 pounds, and went out to the courtyard to practice under the moonlight. With my maxed out cold weapon mastery, every move came naturally. Phoenix facing the sun, ocean overturning waves, dark clouds covering snow, 8 steps chasing cicada. Each technique flowed from one to the next like I'd been training for years. The spear felt like an extension of my body. I drilled the full set over and over until every move was second nature. Before tonight, I'd been worried about the quest to destroy the Black Wind stronghold and its 100 bandits. Now, with the Overlord spear mastered, I was confident I could take them on alone. I washed up, went back to bed, and fell asleep thinking about how I was going to wipe out that bandit camp. Next morning, I set out with 2 dressed deer carcasses and the hides, heading for the county town to sell. I took another Tiger Yang pill on the way, 3 pills total now, and the weight on my shoulders felt like nothing. Passing Chao Wang's estate, I saw a crowd gathered outside. People were whispering that the landlord and all his men were dead. Nobody knew how. Some said it was heaven's punishment for his evil deeds. I smiled to myself and kept walking. I sprinted down the main road carrying over 300 pounds of meat, and apparently some soldiers on a side road saw me fly past. They couldn't believe their eyes, but were in too much of a hurry to stop. Something about bandits kidnapping someone important. 2 hours later, I reached the county town. I found the meat market and sold the deer, 328 pounds at 30 coins per pound, plus 1 string of cash for a deerskin. Came out to about 11 strings of cash total. The shop owner was impressed by how quickly I did business. I took every coin straight to the grain shop and bought 11 strings worth of millet. The shopkeeper treated me like royalty. That was a huge order. Once the grain was weighed and bagged, over 1,000 pounds of it, the shopkeeper turned around for 1 second to tell me about hiring an ox cart. When he looked back, I was gone. So was all the grain. Only his money was left on the counter. The man nearly had a heart attack, screaming about ghosts in broad daylight. I'd stored everything into my space the moment he wasn't looking. I checked on the tiger inside the space. It sniffed the pile of grain, decided it wasn't interested, and walked away. Good. I'd been worried the beast would wreck my supplies. I spent my last coins on salt, then headed back. Near the city gate, I almost crashed into 2 soldiers running at full speed, the same ones who'd seen me sprinting with the deer earlier. They recognized me, but had no time to talk. They rushed to a large estate in the city and reported to their lord. That lord was Yin Xiu, a viscount of the fallen Liang Dynasty and a former border general. His father died in battle 3 years ago, and he'd been stripped of his military command by court rivals, demoted to guarding this remote county. The soldiers told him that Black Wind stronghold bandits had ambushed their escort on the road and kidnapped his mother and sister. Over 20 of his men were killed or wounded. Yin Xiu was furious. He suited up in armor, grabbed his sword, mounted his horse, and mustered nearly all 500 of the county's garrison troops to march on the stronghold. Meanwhile, I was already racing through the back roads toward the same destination. The time was right. I had 3 tigers' worth of strength, a mastered Overlord spear, and a quest to finish. No more waiting. Meanwhile, on the road to Black Wind stronghold, Yin Xiu's officers were trying to talk him out of attacking. They warned him the bandit leader Qin Ba was no ordinary thug. He came from a military noble family and was a skilled fighter who chose bandit life over a proper career. The stronghold was built for defense, and 500 soldiers might not be enough. But Yin Xiu slapped one of them across the head and said if he couldn't even protect his own mother and sister, what was the point of his title? He'd rather become a bandit himself than abandon his family. Up at the stronghold, things were ugly. The bandits had captured over a dozen women, all tied up tight. Qin Ba's lieutenants were drooling over them like wolves. One of them had his eye on an older woman. That was Yin Xiu's mother. A young woman screamed at them not to touch her, threatening that her brother was a viscount with troops stationed nearby. Qin Ba just laughed. He bragged that his own family were nobles too, and he could have had a title any time he wanted. He threw Yin Xiu's sister, Yin Shuang, over his shoulder and headed for his room, announcing he'd make her his bride. She sobbed and struggled, but couldn't break free. He tossed the rest of the women to his men as rewards. The cheering was deafening. That's when I made my entrance. Hey, you're having a bondage party and didn't invite me, I called out from the watchtower above. Every bandit froze. They had no idea how I'd gotten past all their checkpoints. I stepped off the tower onto the guard below. He hit the ground and died on impact. Qin Ba pointed at me screaming, demanding to know who I was. I ignored him. I walked over and locked the front gate shut. Then I turned around with ice in my eyes. 5 years ago, a couple was killed while hunting behind Lu family village. Was that you? He barely remembered. He'd ruined too many lives to keep track. So what if it was? He looked around at his 100+ men and felt safe. He ordered them to grab me and burn me alive. I pulled out my steel spear. This was the first real test of my Overlord spear technique, and these bandits would be my practice dummies. They charged. I swept the spear low and slashed through several throats in one move. More rushed in. I drove the butt of the spear forward with a heavy thrust that shattered a man's spine and sent his body flying into a crowd, knocking down a whole group. I carved a bloody path straight through the mob. Anyone my spear touched was either dead or broken. I went straight for the leaders. Chinba grabbed a 60-pound halberd and leaped at me with an overhead chop aimed at my skull. I raised my spear and blocked it. The collision pushed me back 2 steps, but it sent him flying back over a dozen. His hands were shaking, blood dripping from his mouth. He couldn't believe my raw power. He was a third-rate general-level fighter himself, and he'd just lost the exchange badly. My turn. I closed the gap in a flash and fought all 4 bandit chiefs at once. With 3 tigers' worth of strength and a perfected spear art, I wasn't afraid of anything. I knocked Chinba's halberd out of his hands and drove my spear straight through his chest. He died stunned. His proudest skills hadn't lasted 10 moves against me. The other 3 chiefs panicked, and I cut them down in seconds. Then I dove into the remaining mob and finished the job. Every swing of my spear ended lives. One full cycle of the technique later, every bandit in the stronghold was on the ground. Blood ran in streams across the yard. Bodies and groaning wounded covered every inch of the place. The bandit's strategist hiding inside a building was so terrified, he wet himself. Yin Shuang had been watching from the shadows the whole time. When I turned around, she was staring at me with wide, glowing eyes. She was convinced I was some kind of god sent from heaven to save her. "Hero, no, immortal big brother, please save me," she called out. I looked back and met those sparkling eyes staring straight into mine. I walked over to the girl who'd called out to me. She was a mess. Hair everywhere, clothes twisted by the ropes, face bright red with embarrassment. I cut her free with one swipe of my spear tip. She immediately ran to untie her mother, and soon all the captured women were loose. They bowed and thanked me together. I told them to get out of here fast. The system confirmed the quest was complete. I got the proud cold 6 strikes blade technique, 10 acceleration cards, 10 Tiger Yang pills, and 1,000 points. With the Overlord spear already making me this strong, mastering a second weapon art would make me truly unstoppable. The women hurried down the mountain while I went to search the stronghold. Inside one of the rooms, I smelled something awful and found the bandit's strategist hiding under a table, pants soaked with piss, begging for his life. He offered to show me Chinba's treasure stash and the supply warehouse if I spared him. I made him lead me to Chinba's room first. Following his tip, I stomped around the floor until I found a hollow spot, smashed the stone slab open with my spear, and uncovered a huge chest buried underneath. It was packed with coins, jade, pearls, thousands of strings of cash worth of loot. I stored it all into my space in an instant. The strategist's jaw dropped watching everything vanish into thin air. Next, he took me to a massive stone door at the back of the mountain, the main supply warehouse. He said only the dead bandit chiefs knew how to open it. No problem. I jumped high and brought my spear down with all 3 tigers' worth of force. The door shattered. Inside was a mountain of grain, over 100 stones worth. I swept every last bit into my storage space. The strategist watched it all disappear and looked like he'd witnessed a miracle. He nervously asked if he could go home now. I nodded and smiled. The moment he turned his back, I put my spear through him. A strategist was the one who planned all those raids and murders. His hands were far from clean. And he'd seen my ability. He had to go. Loaded with treasure and supplies, I headed down the mountain humming to myself. On the way, I spotted a long column of soldiers marching up the trail with banners flying, official troops. That had to be Yin Xiu coming to rescue his family. I didn't know if these soldiers were friends or enemies, so I slipped into the forest and went around them without being seen. When Yin Xiu reached the stronghold, he and his men were speechless. Over 100 dead bandits, not a single survivor. He found Chinba's body with a hole through his chest and finally believed his sister's story. He ordered a search of the mountain to find me, but I was long gone. He spotted a distant figure on the road below and took a dozen personal guards to chase after it. Meanwhile, trouble was waiting for me back home. The county deputy magistrate Huang Tong, Chao Wang's nephew, had shown up at the village with armed officers. He'd heard that Chao Wang's people had a conflict with a hunter from our village right before the massacre at the estate. He wanted to question me. His men were eyeing my wives with ugly grins, suggesting they drag the women in for interrogation since I wasn't around. But Uncle stood in front of everyone holding an old machete, daring any of them to try. The whole village closed ranks behind him with farm tools in hand. Huang Tong backed off. He had no proof, no witnesses, and he knew he couldn't arrest an entire village. He claimed he was just there for routine questions, nothing more. I was still on my way home, unaware of any of this. But I wasn't worried about the future. I had enough grain to feed the whole village for years, a growing arsenal, 2 deadly weapon arts, and a system that kept rewarding me. The plan was simple: gather good people around me, build power step by step, and grow from nothing into something no one could ignore. I'd barely walked back into the village when 2 officers spotted me and called out to Huang Tong. They pointed at the blood on my clothes and demanded I explain myself. Huang Tong ordered me to come to the government office for questioning about Chao Wang's death. I stood my ground. Where's your evidence? Without proof, I'm not going anywhere. Right then the system popped up with a new quest: kill Huang Tong and earn the 9 swords of Dugu technique, plus an acceleration card, 100 points, and a Tiger Yang pill. The 9 swords of Dugu, that was legendary. Clearly Huang Tong was rotten enough for the system to flag him. I'd deal with him when the time was right. My wives and the whole village gathered behind me. Uncle grabbed his old machete and planted himself between me and the officers, telling them they'd have to go through him first. The rest of the villagers stepped forward too, tools in hand. Yesterday I'd fed them all a good meal, and today they were ready to face down the law for me. That hit me right in the chest. The officers froze. These guys were good at shaking down peasants and stealing lunches, but an actual fight? Not a chance. Huang Tong screamed at them to arrest everyone, calling us all rebels. When nobody moved, he grabbed a sword himself and charged at us. I was about to pull my own blade and end this, even if it meant becoming an outlaw, when a booming voice from behind shouted, "Stop!" I turned and saw an armored officer sprinting toward us with about a dozen guards. Huang Tong's face lit up, thinking reinforcements had arrived. He laughed and told us we were all dead. But the man who arrived was Yin Xiu, the Viscount. He'd been chasing me all the way from the mountain. He looked me over carefully, checking me against his sister's description. Blood still wet on my clothes, the right build, the right face. He was sure I was the one. Before Yin Xiu could speak, Huang Tong jumped in begging him to help arrest us. Yin Xiu's expression went cold. He told Huang Tong flatly that law enforcement wasn't his job and that the idea of someone controlling a man-eating tiger to commit murder was ridiculous. Who could possibly tame a beast like that? Then he did something nobody expected. He walked up to me, changed his stern face to a warm smile, and asked if I was the one who cleared out Blackwind Stronghold. I didn't know his intentions, but the secret was already out. If he turned hostile, I'd just add more bodies to my count. Yes, I said. I did it alone. Yin Xiu stepped back, placed his fists together, and bowed deeply at a full 90 degrees. In front of everyone, villagers, officers, all of them, a Viscount bowed to me. I am Yin Xiu, Viscount of Xing County. Thank you for saving my mother and sister. I will never forget this debt. Whatever you need in the future, just ask. The whole village went silent, then erupted. People couldn't believe what they were seeing. A real nobleman, bowing to one of us. The villagers whispered frantically, trying to piece together what had happened. Huang Tong nearly choked. He sputtered that a noble shouldn't bow to a commoner, that it violated court protocol, and that I was shameless for accepting it. He didn't get to finish. Yin Xiu spun around and slapped him across the face so hard his head snapped sideways. Shut your mouth. Can't you see I'm thanking the man who saved my family? Yin Xiu's slap sent Huang Tong spinning like a top. The man crashed to the ground holding his face, completely stunned. Uncle and the villagers were confused, so Yin Xiu explained everything for them. How I'd gone up Blackwind Stronghold alone, killed over 100 bandits, and saved his mother and sister in the process. Nobody could believe it at first. Huang Tong and his officers argued it was impossible. How could someone my size do all that? Yin Xiu glared at them and said they were welcome to go check the bodies themselves. Then he reminded Huang Tong that by law, anyone who eliminates bandits deserves a reward from the government. He told the deputy magistrate to go verify the kills and arrange my payment immediately. Huang Tong looked like he'd swallowed something rotten. He forced out a smile, said he'd handle it, and left with his men. The moment he was gone, the whole village swarmed around me. Everyone was thrilled. The bandits that had terrorized the area for years were finally gone. The village elders talked about visiting the ancestral hall to celebrate. Having someone like me in the family meant nobody would dare bully our village again. Yin Xiu invited me to the county town for a proper thank you dinner. He seemed like a decent man, no arrogance, no airs. But it was getting late, so I politely declined and suggested another day. He was surprised anyone would turn him down, but he took it well. I told him the rescue was just a side effect of avenging my parents, nothing worth celebrating. Then I suggested he pay extra attention to the city defenses in the coming days. He looked puzzled by that, but I didn't explain further. I walked back toward the village with everyone, but once out of sight, I slipped away into the forest and started sprinting toward Xing County. Night was falling fast, perfect conditions to take care of Huang Tong and claim the 9 swords of Dugu reward. I took mountain shortcuts and soon spotted 2 groups of torches below on the main road. The larger group was Yin Xiu's party. The smaller one, several miles ahead, was Huang Tong and his officers. I ran until I was well past them, then came down to the road and waited. I could hear them talking as they approached. Huang Tong had no intention of verifying anything or giving me any reward. He was already scheming, planning to report Qin Ba's death to the general's family back in the provincial capital. Qin Ba came from military nobility, and Huang Tong figured that family would want revenge. He'd use them to destroy both me and Yin Xiu, and maybe even gain powerful new connections in the process. He was practically grinning, imagining us begging at his feet. Then his lead officer yanked the reins and shouted. Someone was blocking the road. "We just saw each other, and you've already forgotten me," I said from the darkness. Huang Tong's confidence drained in an instant. He stammered, asking what I wanted. "You wanted to know how Chao Wang died? Let me show you," I called out. "Big tiger, come out." The massive white-browed tiger materialized from thin air right in front of them. Its roar shook the night sky. The horses went berserk, bucking and throwing every rider to the ground before bolting into the darkness. One officer fainted on the spot. Miles behind us, Yin Xiu and his men heard the roar and froze. Without ranged weapons, they decided to take a different route to avoid the beast. Huang Tong stared at the tiger, face white as paper, and finally understood everything. It was you all along." Huang Tong's screams didn't last long. The tiger ripped into him, snapped his neck, and tore his head clean off. The system confirmed the kill, 9 swords of Dugu technique, 1 tiger yang pill, 100 points. Done. The remaining officers were paralyzed with fear, pants soaked, trying to crawl away. The tiger didn't give them a chance. It finished all 4 or 5 of them in moments, like swatting flies. I'd planned to let the tiger go free after this, but the beast had other ideas. Once it was done with the weak ones, it turned on me again, bearing those 10-centimeter fangs, and launched itself at me. Fine. I'd lost to this thing 2 days ago and still had something to prove. Now with 3 tigers worth of strength and a perfected spear art, I wanted to see what it could really do. I summoned my silver spear. The tiger reared up on its hind legs, towering over me, and swung a massive paw. I blocked with my spear and felt its raw power, stronger than anything I'd faced, including Qin Ba. But I kicked it square in the belly and sent it tumbling across the ground. After that hit, it knew it couldn't win. It crouched low and started circling me cautiously. Impressive. Most animals would have fled. I charged in. The tiger stood up again and swiped at me. I dodged easily. I could have killed it with one thrust, but I didn't want to. Instead, I tackled it, pinned its head down, and beat it with my fists until blood dripped from its mouth, and it whimpered, going completely still. It was fully submitted. When I let go, it didn't run. It just lay flat with its claws retracted. I'd won it over. I felt a little guilty about the beating, so I fed it a tiger yang pill. Its wounds healed fast, and I could see its power growing even stronger. The look in its eyes changed, clearer, almost respectful. "How about you stick with me from now on? I'll make sure you eat meat every day." It growled softly, but didn't leave. I reached out and rubbed its enormous head. No resistance at all. I grinned and stored it back into my space, then tossed in the bodies of Huang Tong and the officers. This time, The tiger didn't shred them. It just ate properly. Good boy. On the way home, the night air tasted sweet. When I reached the village entrance, Uncle was waiting under the old tree. He looked at me with a complicated expression and quietly asked if I'd taken care of everything and left no loose ends. Nothing got past this man. All clean, Uncle. Don't worry. He patted my shoulder, seemed like he wanted to say more, but just turned and walked away. At home, my 3 wives and little Nuan were still up waiting with dinner ready, even though it was nearly midnight. That warmth of coming home to people who cared. I'd never had that in my old life. I picked up Nuan and sat down to eat. Her stomach was growling loudly. I told Wanyang that in the future, if I'm late, they should eat without me and not starve the child. She nodded sweetly. After dinner, I reached for one of my wife's hands and called her Meow Meow. She blushed and corrected me. She was Jiang He, the older sister. Meow Meow had gone to fetch water. They looked so alike I genuinely couldn't tell in the dim lamplight. Everyone laughed at my mistake, and I felt a secret thrill. Maybe next time I wouldn't try so hard to tell them apart. Jiang He and Wanyang took Nuan to bed, leaving Jiang Miao alone with me. The younger sister stood there red-faced, hands fidgeting, unable to get a single word out. She was the shy, quiet one, the biggest difference between her and her sister. I just smiled. That bashful look of hers was something else entirely. That night, Jiang Miao and I talked by candlelight. She was nervous. It was our first time alone together. To break the ice, I asked what she wanted most. Her eyes went dim, and she said quietly that she wanted to visit her mother, who was in poor health. The sisters had been here several days without going back. I told her I'd take them tomorrow and bring some wild boar meat for their mother. Her whole face lit up, the biggest smile I'd ever seen from her. After she fell asleep, I went out to the courtyard and practiced my 2 new techniques. The proud cold 6 strikes was extremely powerful, but I couldn't achieve its full potential yet. Maybe I wasn't strong enough, or maybe I needed the right weapon. For now, the Overlord spear was still better for actual combat. The 9 swords of Dugu was completely different. 9 elegant forms, each one flashy but deadly underneath. I liked it a lot. Definitely worth mastering. Meanwhile, Yin Xiu had told his sister my name and where I lived. Yin Shuang repeated it to herself with a dreamy look on her face. She'd clearly been thinking about me since the rescue. She begged her brother to take her along when he visited to thank me. He told her about my warning to watch the city defenses, and she filled him in on what she'd seen during their journey. Troops marching north, refugees flooding the roads, chaos spreading everywhere. Yin Xiu realized I might have already predicted the coming turmoil, which made him even more eager to seek me out. Next morning, officers came asking Yin Xiu if he'd seen Huang Tong, who never came home last night. Yin Xiu said he'd seen him on the road and assumed he'd returned. He remembered the tiger's roar from the night before and figured out what probably happened. But it wasn't his problem. Good riddance. He immediately ordered his garrison to tighten city defenses, then headed out to visit me, with his sister clinging to his sleeve, insisting she come along. Back at the village, I got up early and decided to share what I had with my people. I still had over 100 pounds of wild boar left from the feast, plus plenty of grain. These villagers had stood between me and the law yesterday, without hesitation. That kind of loyalty deserved something in return. I cut the pork into portions of about a pound each, and my 3 wives helped carry the meat while I shouldered 2 big sacks of grain. We went door to door. At one house, a young widow named Lin Shulian opened up. Her husband had died in the war too, just like Wan Yang's, leaving her alone with a 2-year-old daughter. When the door opened, I have to admit, I stared a moment too long. She had a strikingly pretty face. She caught me looking and turned red. I snapped out of it and handed over the meat and grain, giving her a little extra since I could see how thin she and her daughter were. She thanked us over and over and offered to help with the rest of the deliveries. Before long, the whole village was buzzing. Word spread fast. People came running out as we made our rounds, and soon everyone knew that the kid who'd killed 100 bandits was now handing out free food. Word spread fast, and the whole village came out, saving me the trouble of going door to door. Some tried to refuse, saying I had mouths to feed myself, but I insisted. A pound of wild boar and 10 pounds of millet per family, more than most of them saw, even during New Year. Uncle watched the whole thing with a proud grin. His nephew was strong and generous. Nothing made him happier. After that, Nobody dared mock me for marrying a widow anymore. Wanyang's standing in the village shot up overnight, especially since I kept telling everyone my sudden strength came from the good luck of the wedding night. I left Wanyang and Wanwan at home and set off with the two sisters to visit their mother. Their village was less than 10 miles away. Both women were carrying heavy bags of meat and grain, but walked the whole distance without breaking a sweat, proof the Tiger Yang pills were doing their job. Along the way, we passed a man beating his wife in a field just because she'd glanced in our direction. I recognized him, Zhang Erniu, the sister's cousin, a notorious lowlife, gambler, thief, bully. He'd apparently picked up a wife from the recent matchmaking too, and she was pretty. Wasted on a guy like him. Erniu spotted me and came running over, all friendly. The moment he saw the bags of food, his eyes went wide. He grabbed at one of the sacks, and I slapped his hand away. He got pushy, guilt-tripping me about being brothers and how I owed him. In the original owner's memories, this clown had always tricked him into paying for drinks. I told him off, and we kept walking. He stood there glaring at our backs, already scheming how to get his hands on our supplies. We reached the sisters' family home. A little boy, their nephew, was playing in the dirt out front. When he saw us, he ran inside yelling, "Mom, the money losers are back," clearly something the adults had taught him. Both sisters looked embarrassed. Their sister-in-law, Li Chunhua, stormed out with a broom. She blocked the door and sneered at the girls, asking why they'd come. When I introduced myself, she told me not to think about mooching a meal and to get lost. Then the sister's mother, Zhang, came out. The moment she saw her daughters, she rushed forward, checking them over, worried something had gone wrong at their new home. The girls quickly reassured her. They were happy, well-fed, and their husband treated them wonderfully. Zhang noticed how much healthier they looked compared to just days ago and relaxed. She welcomed me warmly and tried to invite us inside. But Li Chunhua blocked the doorway again. And right at that moment, a furious shout came from behind us. "Lu Qian, you animal. I treated you like a brother, and you try to mess with my wife." Before I knew it, Zhang Erniu and his wife came charging at us. He threw himself on the ground, screaming that I tried to force myself on his wife. He pointed at her bruises, the ones he'd given her himself, and claimed I did it. He wailed for the whole village to hear, rolling around like a professional actor. I stood there with my arms crossed watching the performance. The man deserved an award. The villagers didn't know the real story and got furious. They started calling me an animal and talking about dragging me to the authorities. I shouted them down and told them to use their brains. My two wives were right there and saw everything. Zhang, he confronted Erniu's wife directly, demanding she tell the truth about who beat her. The poor woman glanced at her husband, terrified, and went silent. She'd obviously been threatened. Erniu kept pushing. He demanded I either go to court or pay him for medical treatment. Classic shakedown. I kicked him to the ground and told him where to shove it. That set the crowd off. They surged forward. I pushed my wives behind me into the courtyard and faced the mob alone. After killing over 100 bandits, these people didn't scare me one bit. I pulled a blade from my sleeve and told them anyone who took another step would regret it for the rest of their life. Mother-in-law Zhang and the sisters ran out begging everyone to calm down. The girls grabbed my hands. They knew if I really lost my temper, the whole village combined couldn't stop me. Erniu kept stirring things up from the ground, wailing about injustice. Some villagers tried to rally the crowd to rush me. Things were about to get ugly. Then a sharp voice cut through the noise. "Stop!" Everyone turned. A man in fine blue silk rode up on horseback with a beautiful young woman and a squad of armored guards. It was Yin Xiu and his sister Yin Shuang. The villagers parted like water. Erniu, clueless as ever, asked who this newcomer was. A guard slapped him to the ground and barked that this was the Viscount who commanded the county garrison. The entire village dropped to their knees instantly. Yin Xiu walked past all of them and came straight to me with a smile. "You all right, brother?" Yin Shuang was right behind him, practically bouncing with excitement. "Hey, savior. We meet again." She looked completely different from the filthy, disheveled hostage I'd freed at the stronghold. Cleaned up, she was stunning. Smooth skin, sweet face, bright eyes. My two wives noticed her too and suddenly looked a little self-conscious. Yin Xiu explained they'd gone to my village first, heard I was visiting the in-laws, and came here because his sister wouldn't stop pestering him about finding me. Then he turned to the kneeling crowd. and the warmth vanished from his face. He told them exactly who I was, the man who single-handedly wiped out Blackwind's stronghold and every bandit inside it. He said they were lucky they hadn't actually touched me, because if they had, they wouldn't be walking away whole. The villagers couldn't believe what Yin Xiu said. Over 100 bandits killed by this skinny kid? Impossible. Yin Xiu just shrugged and told them they were welcome to test me themselves, but he wouldn't be responsible for what happened. Then he stood right beside me. Nobody dared move after that. I explained the situation to him. He was furious, calling it slander against an honorable man. He marched over to Erniyu's wife, Lin Wan, and demanded the truth. She was terrified, caught between the powerful lord in front of her and the husband who'd beaten her into obedience. Yin Xiu roared at her to stop looking at Erniyu and answer him. She tried to speak, but Erniyu cut in, threatening to cripple her if she talked. Yin Xiu ordered his guards to shut him up. 2 soldiers grabbed Erniyu and slapped his face until it swelled like a melon. With Erniyu silenced, Lin Wan finally broke down and told everything. I'd never touched her. Erniyu saw our food and got greedy. He beat her again to make her injuries look fresh, then forced her to play along with his act. She said he'd threatened to break her legs and starve her for 3 days if she didn't cooperate. She'd already gone 2 days without food. In 5 days of marriage, he'd beaten her over a dozen times. She sobbed through the whole confession, then collapsed unconscious from exhaustion and hunger. I told my wives to carry her inside. I dissolved a small amount of Tiger Yang pill in water and fed her a few spoonfuls. She was too weak for a full dose. I drank the rest myself. No point wasting it. Outside, the villagers were livid at Erniyu for tricking them and nearly getting the whole village in trouble with a viscount. The clan elders begged permission to punish him by their own rules. Yin Xiu looked at me and asked what I wanted. I looked at the crowd and said one sentence. I don't want to see this man next time I bring my wives home. The room went cold. The clan leader gritted his teeth and declared Erniyu would be executed under clan law and his name erased from the family records. I went back inside without another word. Soon I heard Erniyu's screams from the yard, begging for mercy, then silence. They buried him. When Lin Wan woke up, the sisters told her Erniyu was dead and that I'd saved her life. Relief washed over her face, then dread. She was a widow now, with no way to survive alone. The despair hit her all at once. She lunged toward the wall, trying to kill herself. My wives caught her just in time. She crumpled to the floor crying. The sisters looked at me, unsure what to do. I crouched down beside her, smiled gently, and said, "How about you come home with us?" Lin Wan stared at me in disbelief, then looked at my wives. The sisters smiled and nodded at her. Something in her eyes changed, like light breaking through after a long darkness. She dropped to her knees and thanked us over and over. Yin Xiu and his sister had followed us inside. He clapped his hands and praised my kindness. Yin Shuang stood beside him with puffed cheeks and a complicated expression. I wasn't sure what to make of that. The sister-in-law, Li Chunhua, came out of the kitchen looking terrified. After seeing what happened to Erniyu, she knew she'd been rude to me earlier. She walked up to my wives and slapped herself across the face twice, apologizing. The sisters told her they didn't hold a grudge. They just wanted her to treat their mother better. She agreed instantly. The older brother, Jiang Taizhu, came home from the fields, and his wife quickly filled him in. He rushed over to greet me, stumbling over fancy words he barely knew, trying to compliment me. He was genuinely happy. He'd always been stuck between wanting to help his sisters and his difficult wife. We all laughed, and I let the earlier unpleasantness go. They were family now. After the meal, we said goodbye. Lin Wan had nothing to pack. Erniyu had gambled away everything she'd brought. All she had were the clothes on her back. My wives took her arms and told her those days were over. On the road back, Yin Xiu walked beside me and asked what I'd meant about watching the city defenses. I said I wasn't certain, just that he should stay alert. He told me his mother and sister had fled to Xing County because their home region had already descended into chaos, refugees and defeated soldiers flooding in everywhere. That matched what I'd expected. I decided to go buy more grain tomorrow while I still could. He asked where I'd learned to fight. I told him my master had forbidden me from saying. He didn't push it. Instead, he offered me a position in the military, saying with my skills I could have a brilliant career. He also hinted that now that I had a family, I'd be eligible for conscription. Joining him voluntarily would be smarter than being drafted to the front lines. I thanked him politely, and said I'd think about it. But in my head, the answer was no. The dynasty was already gone. Serve what exactly? With the system backing me, why would I put myself under someone else's command? I planned to build my own power, my own way. We parted ways. I noticed Yin Shuang staring after me as we walked away, looking like she didn't want to leave. Her brother shook his head at her, clearly seeing what I saw. The girl had feelings she hadn't figured out yet. Back home, I found Yin Xiu had left generous gifts: tea, jade, pastries, bolts of cloth. I sent 2 rolls of fabric to the village tailor for new clothes for my wives and ordered extra beds from the carpenter. I told Lin Wan to call me by name, not master. I was only 18. She settled in fast, throwing herself into housework to earn her keep. At dinner she was amazed. As much food and meat as she wanted, something she'd never experienced. Afterward, she brought a basin of hot water, face red, and offered to help me wash up. I swallowed hard. Just this morning, she'd been another man's wife. Don't call me master, I said. I just turned 18. She tilted her head, confused. Then what should I call you? I smiled and told her she could call me whatever she liked, Brother Qian or husband. Her face turned red as an apple and she whispered, husband, so quietly I barely heard it. She wasn't stupid. She knew the difference between being a concubine and being a servant, and she chose wisely. I told her I wanted to check her injuries. She leaned into me, and I could see in her eyes a softness that Erniu had never given her. When I looked at her body, it was covered in bruises, beaten black and blue everywhere. I asked if it still hurt. She said the medicine I'd given her earlier had already taken the pain away. That night, the system rewarded me again. 40 acres of farmland, 40 livestock, 40 Tiger Yang pills, and 2,000 points. The rewards kept doubling. Free stuff really was the best. Meanwhile, in Xing County, the county magistrate Zhuang Song rushed to Yin Xiu's estate late at night with devastating news. 12 days ago, barbarian invaders had worked with traitors inside the court to breach the capital. The emperor was strangled in his own throne hall. The Liang Dynasty was finished. The traitor was the Marquis of Wuhan, commander of the 200,000-strong capital garrison. Yin Xiu was stunned. He'd always known things were bad, but not this bad. He'd hoped to one day lead troops north to reclaim lost territory. Now there was nothing left to serve. Zhuang Song warned that warlords were already carving up the country and refugees would flood their county within days. The 2 men immediately started planning. Yin Xiu ordered all government funds used to secretly buy up every grain merchant's stock. The city walls strengthened, and new soldiers recruited from the strongest refugees. Money would be worthless once war came. Only food and fighters mattered. Next morning, I rushed to town with all my cash to buy grain. But I was too late. Store after store had been cleaned out by bulk buyers since dawn. Someone had clearly gotten the news and started hoarding. Refugees were already appearing on the streets in growing numbers. I ran from shop to shop across the entire city. In the end, I scraped together less than 200 stone of grain, using my old trick. Pay the shopkeeper, wait for him to turn around, store everything into my space, and disappear. That was still over 20,000 pounds, enough to feed the village for a long time. I was about to head home when shouts erupted outside. Soldiers were running through the streets with weapons, rushing toward the city walls from every direction. My heart dropped. I sprinted for the gate. I ran for the city gate, but soldiers blocked my path. By the Viscount's orders, nobody was allowed to leave. Before I could argue, a voice boomed from outside the walls. A commander claiming his troops were part of the Chu King's Western Army, demanding entry. From the wall, Yin Xiu could see thousands of soldiers gathered outside, many wounded, their equipment in poor shape. This was clearly a defeated army that had fled from the front lines. When Yin Xiu offered to let them in only if they surrendered their weapons, their leader, a baron named Yuan, exploded with threats, promising to slaughter everyone if the gates didn't open. Yin Xiu responded by putting an arrow straight through the man's helmet, grazing his scalp. He told Yuan to leave, or the next one would go through his skull. Yuan backed off for now, but with only 500 defenders against several thousand, Yin Xiu knew this wasn't over. The moment Yuan retreated, he ordered his men to start building siege equipment. Worse, he sent squads of 200 soldiers each to raid every village around the county for food and supplies. My blood ran cold. My wives, my daughter, my whole village was out there unprotected. I bumped into Yin Xiu inside the city. He quickly explained everything. I told him the defeated army would definitely start looting villages and begged him to open the gate so I could get home. He refused. Enemy scouts were watching, and cracking the gate even slightly could trigger a rush attack. I told him I was going regardless. If he couldn't open the gate, just let me climb the wall. He stared at me for a long moment, then sighed and ordered a soldier to take me up and lower me in a basket. I was too impatient for a basket. I asked them to just tie a rope to a post. They did, and I grabbed it and dropped straight down, 5 stories of city wall, landing cleanly on my feet. The soldiers above were impressed, but figured I was heading to my death. They were right that the enemy spotted me immediately. Yuan saw a single man jump from the walls and sent 5 or 6 soldiers to grab me for questioning. The system lit up with a new quest: break through the encirclement. Reward: the Earth Fiend 72 forms halberd technique, 20 acceleration cards, 20 Tiger Yang pills, and 2,000 points. Finally, a halberd art to add to my collection. There was no avoiding this fight. I pulled out my silver spear and charged straight at the incoming soldiers. Anyone in my way dies. The soldiers on the wall shook their heads, figuring I was done for. Then my spear appeared in my hands out of thin air, and every jaw on that wall dropped. The first 6 soldiers charged me. One exchange, all 6 hit the ground. I didn't even break stride. The city wall erupted in cheers. Yuan's smirk vanished. He couldn't believe 6 men went down that fast, so he sent his centurion Lu Cheng with 200 soldiers. I wasn't worried. By now I had 5 tigers worth of strength, real 10,000-pound power. Plus my tiger needed feeding, so I could toss bodies into the storage space during the chaos. I charged straight into the mass of enemies. I leaped, spun in the air for momentum, and landed with a thrust that skewered 3 men on my spear like a kebab. When they tried to surround me, I swept the spear in a wide arc and sent 4 or 5 soldiers flying, crashing into others behind them. The defenders on the wall were losing their minds. They couldn't understand how someone my size had this kind of monstrous power. Even I'm human, though. One soldier got close enough to stab at me with his sword. I couldn't dodge in time, so I used my storage ability. The instant the blade touched me, I stored it right off his hands. The man stood there staring at his empty fists. I kicked him dead and spun around, spear pointed at the rest. Anyone else want to try? Lu Cheng came riding through the crowd on horseback, lance aimed at my face. Perfect, I needed that horse. I sidestepped his thrust, grabbed his spear shaft, and yanked him clean off the saddle. He hit the ground face first in a spray of blood. I jumped on the horse, kicked its sides hard, and the animal surged forward, smashing through the soldiers blocking my path. With a horse under me, breaking through was easy. Yuan screamed for reinforcements, but it was too late. I rode hard for the nearest tree line without looking back. Once inside the forest, I stored the horse and took off on foot, my specialty. Within minutes, the pursuers were nowhere to be seen. The system confirmed the quest complete. Earth Fiend 72 forms halberd technique, 20 acceleration cards, 20 Tiger Yang pills, and 2,000 points. I also had 7 or 8 fresh bodies stored for the tiger's meals. The rush was incredible. Charging alone into thousands of enemy soldiers, cutting through them like they were nothing, then vanishing into the woods with a pile of rewards. Way more thrilling than the bandit raid. But the excitement faded fast. Those defeated soldiers would be raiding every village nearby for supplies. My wives, my daughter, my whole clan were sitting there with no idea what was coming. I pushed harder through the forest, taking every shortcut I knew, praying I wasn't too late. 2.5 hours of sprinting through the forest, taking every shortcut I knew, and I made it back to the village in half the usual time. Everything looked peaceful. The old uncles were sitting under the big tree chatting like any other day. I exhaled with relief. The soldiers hadn't reached us yet. I didn't waste a second. I told the elders to sound the alarm. Defeated soldiers were heading this way to raid every village they could find. I'd seen them on the road already. The old men turned pale and ran faster than I'd ever seen them move. The village gong rang out, sharp and urgent. Everyone came running from the fields. I told them all to grab essentials and head into the mountains to hide. A few younger villagers doubted me, but the old clan elder smacked one of them on the head and pointed at my blood-soaked clothes. I'd fought my way out of an army to bring this warning. That settled it. Everyone scattered home, grabbed what they could, and started climbing. Halfway up the mountain, Someone pointed at the road below. A long column of soldiers was marching toward us. We'd made it just in time. Then the column split at a crossroads. One group headed for Jiang family village, the other straight for ours. My wives grabbed my sleeve, faces white. Their mother was still down in Jiang village. I couldn't say no. I told everyone to keep moving into the mountains and ran back down. Uncle appeared through the crowd and insisted on coming with me. I tried to talk him out of it. His bad leg would slow him down. He told me not to underestimate him. Fine. Once we were clear of the group, I handed him a Tiger Yang pill. He swallowed it without question. The pain hit him hard for a few seconds. Then his whole body surged with new power. Even his old leg injury stopped hurting. He stared at me with wide eyes, and in that moment, he understood everything. How I'd changed, where the strength came from. He didn't need an explanation. As we ran, and he was truly running now, free and fast for the first time in over a decade. I asked what weapons he'd used in the army. Long sword and spear, he said. I pulled a brand new steel spear from my storage space and handed it to him. He didn't ask where it came from. He just gripped it and ran harder. But we were already too late for Jiang village. 100 soldiers had poured in. Their centurion gave one order: take everything. They flooded through the streets, grabbing food, killing anyone who resisted. A village elder tried to stop them and was beheaded on the spot. A man who shielded his family's last bag of grain was kicked until he coughed blood. His mother rushed to help and was cut down. His wife was dragged screaming into a house by a grinning soldier. The whole village had erupted into chaos, screams, crying, the sounds of doors being smashed open. And Uncle and I were still running toward it as fast as we could. By the time Uncle and I reached Jiang village, smoke was already rising from the rooftops. Screams and crying filled the air. We charged straight in. A centurion in armor stood in the village center, ordering his men to grab all the grain and women. The system lit up. New quest: wipe out the raiders. Reward: Heavenly Guardian 36 forms axe technique. 20 acceleration cards, 20 pills, 2,000 points. No hesitation. We attacked. My spear work was razor sharp by now. These regular soldiers were nothing compared to what I'd already faced. Uncle was rusty at first. Years away from combat had stiffened his form. He almost took a blade to the head before I knocked the attacker away with a thrust that shattered bone and sent bodies flying. That lit a fire in him. His old fighting instincts came roaring back, and soon he was cutting through soldiers like the veteran he once was. The centurion watched his men dropping fast. When casualties hit a third of his force, he panicked and ordered a retreat. I wasn't letting him go. I leaped across rooftops, caught up, and kicked him off his horse. My spear went to his throat. He begged for his life. I told him to shut up and order his men to throw down their weapons. He screamed at them until every last soldier tossed their swords at our feet. I interrogated him. His army was part of the Western Shu forces that had been stationed at Jianmen Pass, thousands of miles away. The front had collapsed. The Chu King was dead. The Qin family generals had surrendered their 200,000 troops to the barbarian invaders. Now 30,000+ barbarian cavalry and infantry were pushing south into Shu territory, conquering everything in their path. Their force besieging our county was about 4,000 strong. The news hit like a punch. The barbarians were moving far faster than I'd imagined. I got what I needed and slit the centurion's throat. Then the system dropped the biggest quest yet: defeat all 4,000 enemy soldiers. The original reward included another weapon technique, but I asked the system to swap it for materials instead. It agreed, and doubled everything. For 100 acceleration cards, for 100 Tiger Yang pills, 40,000 points. My jaw nearly hit the floor. Uncle and I slaughtered the remaining 100+ disarmed soldiers. None escaped. I collected the axe technique reward and ran for my mother-in-law's house. But when I burst through the door, brother-in-law Jiang Taizhu and mother Zhang were both lying in pools of blood. I was too late. Inside, sister-in-law Li Chunhua was huddled in a corner, hair wild, clothes torn, clutching a kitchen knife. She was shaking violently, her mind clearly broken. When she saw me, she screamed and called me an animal. She thought I was one of the soldiers. Before I could reach her, she pressed the knife to her own throat and slashed. I lunged forward but couldn't stop it. She bled out in seconds. I walked back outside and stared at the village. Bodies everywhere. Smoke rising. Just days ago, this place had been alive with people greeting us and sharing meals. Now almost no one was left. On the way back, I told Uncle to keep the pill a secret. If word got out about something that powerful, it would paint a target on my back. He understood completely. I was the last of our family line, and he'd never put me at risk. Back at the village, the raiders had come and gone. Thanks to our early evacuation, they found nothing worth taking and moved on. The village was messy but intact. Up on the mountain, I had to break the news to my wives. Their mother and brother were dead. I couldn't even finish the sentence before the sisters collapsed, sobbing. The villagers were furious. These soldiers were worse than the foreign barbarians, butchering their own people. Everyone thanked me for the warning that saved them. Then they asked what to do next. I told them the village wasn't safe anymore, and they needed to prepare for long-term life in the mountains. I'd provide grain and weapons. They'd need to build shelters, and every adult, men and women, would train to fight. We went back down to collect the weapons I'd taken from the dead soldiers, plus crossbows I'd bought from the system shop at 20 points each. I demonstrated one for the crowd. The bolt punched clean through a tree trunk. Everyone was stunned. I explained these were military weapons we'd captured and handed them out. 2 swords and 1 crossbow with 50 bolts per household. Then Lin Xiuyan, the young widow from our village, tugged my sleeve and asked me to teach her the crossbow, since she had no one to wield a sword at home. The village brothers started teasing me, and the older women pushed me to take her to the back mountain for a private lesson. The clan elder pulled me aside and gently suggested that a widow and her baby daughter needed protection in times like these, and that if I was willing. I looked around. Every elder was nodding. Xiuyan's face was crimson. I got the message. I took her to practice, and she turned out to be a natural, hitting targets at 20 meters within half an hour. When we came back, the teasing was merciless, though we'd genuinely just been shooting arrows. Over 3 days, we built rough shelters for the whole group. Over 100 people. Basic, ugly, but dry. We set up 8 big cooking pots and ate communally, pooling all our grain. On the 4th day of the siege, things escalated in the city. Yin Xiu and the magistrate had scraped together only about 700 new recruits to add to the 500 veterans. When the enemy finally assembled their siege equipment and marched on the walls, the new soldiers were terrified. Just days ago, they'd been ordinary civilians. Some tried to run and were cut down on the spot by enforcement squads. Yin Xiu ran along the walls, shouting encouragement, reminding every man that their wives and children were inside the city. If the walls fell, their families would be slaughtered or worse. The veterans were eager for blood, old border fighters who'd battled barbarians for years. The new recruits steadied themselves, thinking of their families. Then the enemy charged. Thousands of soldiers rushed forward with siege ladders and battering rams, shields up front blocking the arrows raining down from above. The battle for the city had begun. Back at the mountain camp, I organized everything. I told the villagers this was going to be long-term. No going back to the village until things were safe. I'd handle the food supply. Everyone would train daily with the weapons I'd handed out. Over 3 days, we built rough shelters and set up communal cooking with 8 big pots. I also gave Uncle more Tiger Yang pills over the following days and started teaching him the Overlord spear technique. He was a fast learner. Years of military experience meant the moves came back naturally. By his 3rd pill, he told me he felt terrifyingly strong and tried to refuse more. I pushed the pill into his hand and told him straight. He'd promised to protect me with his life, so he needed to be powerful enough to actually do it. I was grooming him as my right hand. He took it without another word. Meanwhile, in the city, things were brutal. The enemy brought battering rams against the gates, and each hit shook the entire wall. Soldiers behind the gate braced massive logs against the doors, some dying from the sheer force of the impacts. Internal organs crushed from the vibrations. Yin Xiu ran everywhere, directing the defense, personally hurling fire oil pots down onto the siege equipment. The rams burned, the operators burned with them, but fresh attackers kept coming. On other sections of the wall, enemies climbed ladders faster than the defenders could push them back. New recruits panicked. Some tried to run and were executed on the spot by enforcement squads. Yin Xiu killed climbers himself, grabbing bodies and throwing them back down the ladders to knock others off. Even the magistrate Zhuang Song grabbed a sword and fought. He was terrified, threw up after his first kill, but found a clever tactic. He'd sneak up behind enemy soldiers who were locked in combat with defenders and stab them from behind. Cowardly, maybe, but effective. He took out 5 or 6 that way. The battle lasted until noon before the enemy finally pulled back. The defenders lost over 150 dead, 300 wounded. But the attackers lost 800. Yuan was furious. His men only had 2 days of stolen food left. When an officer raised the supply problem, Yuan casually suggested they butcher the captured women for meat when the grain ran out. They'd been doing this to civilians and refugees since their retreat began, human beings reduced to military rations. Yuan ordered a full assault the next day. Take the city or starve. That evening, I stood on the mountain looking toward the distant city. Uncle was practicing spear forms nearby. When he finished, I told him we were going to the county tomorrow. What for? It's surrounded. To kill the enemy. I turned and walked away. The massive quest reward was calling. 400 acceleration cards. For 100 Tiger Yang pills. 40,000 points. I needed that haul. Behind me, I heard Uncle mutter to himself. He'd been watching me organize refugees, distribute food and weapons, lead people, and something had clicked in his mind. He was starting to see a bigger picture. All right then, he said quietly, gripping his spear. Let's start with these animals. I'll fight beside you. All the way to building a new world if that's what it takes. Next morning, Uncle took his 5th pill and tested his strength by punching a rock. It shattered into pieces, leaving a crater in the ground. He turned to me grinning, asking if I was impressed. I smiled and punched my own rock. The ground shook. When the dust cleared, the stone was powder and the hole was twice the size of his. Uncle's jaw dropped. He figured I was already at first-rate general level. It would take close to 1,000 men to even challenge me. I used 2 acceleration cards on a pair of foals in my storage space. They instantly grew into full-sized warhorses. Uncle's eyes went wide again when 2 massive stallions appeared out of thin air. Next, I bought 2 sets of Tang Dynasty bright light armor from the system shop, 3,000 interlocking steel scales each, triple-layered chest plates, steel face masks, 200 points per set. I also got heavy horse armor. When we finished gearing up, we looked like war gods, 2 fully armored heavy cavalry, armed to the teeth. We rode hard for the city. The siege was already raging when we arrived. Today the enemy was fighting like animals. Yuan had ordered an all-out assault. It was their last chance. 3,000 attackers against a few hundred defenders, and the walls were crumbling. Fire pots, stones, and boiling water rained down, but the enemy kept climbing. On the walls, the new recruits were nearly wiped out. The veteran soldiers had to abandon their positions, throwing things and draw swords for close combat. The battering ram hammered the gate nonstop. One by one, the massive wooden braces behind the doors snapped. Soldiers holding them in place were coughing blood from the impacts, some dying where they stood. Yanxiu fought everywhere at once, killing climbers, rallying troops, refusing to retreat even when his guards tried to drag him away. The magistrate Zhuang Song, now in full armor, was still doing his backstabbing trick, sneaking up behind enemy soldiers locked in combat and finishing them from behind. But it wasn't enough. The gate was seconds from breaking. The defenders' numbers were collapsing. Yanxiu's men begged him to flee. He refused, said he'd rather die on the battlefield. Then the gate cracked wide open. The enemy cheered. That's when we hit them from behind. 2 armored heavy cavalry smashed into the rear of their formation at full gallop. The impact sent bodies flying in every direction. Uncle and I cut through them like a hot knife through paper, spears swinging, soldiers scattering, blood everywhere. Uncle spotted the command platform in the center of the battlefield. That's their commander. Get him. We carved a path straight toward Yuan. He panicked and sounded the gong to redirect his entire army at us. Hundreds of soldiers turned and rushed in, but it made no difference. These men were insects to me now. Yuan grabbed his halberd and charged at me on horseback, screaming. We clashed once. Just once. My spear sent him flying off his horse, blood spraying from his mouth. Hands nearly split open from the impact. His guards pulled him up. His first word was, "Run." He scrambled onto a horse and fled with his bodyguards. If not for the wall of soldiers between us, I'd have finished him right there. I tried to chase Yuan, but the soldiers closed in around me too thick to break through. On the walls, Yanxiu's men used the chaos to regain control. With the enemy formation shattered, No more reinforcements were climbing up. Uncle and I were surrounded by over 2,000 soldiers. I needed to tip the balance. I opened my storage space and fed the tiger another pill. The beast had already grown noticeably bigger in just a few days. The pill sent its energy surging. It went berserk inside the space, desperate to unleash. I released it onto the battlefield. A 700-pound tiger materialized from thin air in front of the enemy. The soldiers nearest to it froze in pure animal terror. One roar shook the ground, and men dropped their weapons, stumbling backward. Then it pounced. One leap covered 8 meters, crushing 4 or 5 men under its weight. A single swipe of its paw killed instantly. Its tail whipped soldiers off their feet. It bit heads clean off. The entire formation dissolved into panic. I followed right behind the tiger and punched through the encirclement. Up on the walls, Yanxio's soldiers watched in disbelief, cheering wildly. Free of the mob, I whipped my horse into a full sprint after Yuan. My system-bred warhorse was far superior to his exhausted mounts. The gap shrank fast. When they entered crossbow range, I switched to my military crossbow and started picking off his bodyguards one by one. Perfect shots, every one. They felt like targets at a range. Yuan watched his guards die around him and knew it was over. When I caught up, he begged for mercy, promised to retreat, never come back. I didn't even let him finish. One swing of my blade took his head off. I jammed it onto my spear tip like a skewer and galloped back to the battlefield. Uncle and the tiger were still trapped, both wounded. The tiger had multiple stab wounds and gashes. The city gates swung open, and Yanxio charged out with his remaining soldiers to help. I rode into the enemy mass holding Yuan's head high on my spear, bellowing at the top of my lungs. Yuan is dead. Drop your weapons and surrender, or none of you leave alive. The shout cut through the noise like thunder. When they saw their commander's head, the fight drained out of most of them instantly. One junior officer tried to rally resistance, so I hurled my sword through his chest from a distance. Then I made my offer. You fought and killed just to survive, right? Surrender now, and I guarantee 2 meals a day, enough to fill your bellies. Keep fighting and you die. They were skeptical. 2,000 mouths was a lot to feed. That's when Yanxio and Magistrate Zhuangsong stepped forward and vouched for me. A viscount and a county magistrate both guaranteeing the deal. The first sword hit the ground with a clang, then dozens more, then hundreds. Men shouted that they were done fighting. They just wanted food. More than half the army surrendered on the spot. But Yuan's personal guard, a few hundred loyalists, refused. They started killing the men who'd surrendered around them, and the chaos erupted again. I raised my spear and roared to the men who'd just joined our side. You're with us now, brothers. Help take down these holdouts. Tonight there's good wine and meat for everyone. The surrendered soldiers turned on the holdouts and chaos erupted again. I didn't need to stay. Yanxio had over 1,000 new fighters now. If he couldn't handle a few hundred stubborn loyalists, he didn't deserve his title. I quietly stored a few dozen corpses into my space as tiger food, then called the tiger to follow me out. It came limping, covered in wounds, stab marks and gashes all over its body, bleeding badly. I felt terrible. I'd sent it into battle without any armor. I knelt down and stroked its head, apologizing. It whimpered like a hurt child. I fed it a pill and stored it back into the space to heal. Uncle was speechless. He just gave me a thumbs up. In his eyes, I wasn't human anymore. I was something else entirely. We rode straight for the enemy camp 10 miles behind the battlefield. The guards there didn't believe their army had lost. They refused to surrender, so Uncle and I cut through them like always. Before we'd even killed half, the rest threw down their weapons and scattered. The system confirmed the big quest complete. 400 acceleration cards, 400 Tiger Yang pills, 40,000 points. I nearly shouted with joy. We split up to search the camp. Uncle went one direction. I went for the main command tent. Inside, I found 2 young women huddled in the corner, terrified. They were beautiful, clearly not common people. The older one dropped to her knees immediately and begged for mercy. She explained they were sisters from a wealthy merchant family in Jinmen Pass, Su Jinyan and Su Jinru. When the front collapsed, Yuan killed their entire family of 70 and took the sisters as concubines. When I told them Yuan was dead, genuine relief flooded their faces. They thanked me for avenging their family. I took off my helmet to drink some water, and I caught the older sister staring. Apparently she'd expected some hulking brute, not a young man. They exchanged a look, then knelt beside me and asked to follow me wherever I went. No home, no family, nowhere safe to go. I agreed. Uncle came running and shouting about what he'd found. Over 100 horses, weapons, grain stores, and a group of imprisoned women. I stored all the useful supplies into my space. Then I opened the prison and told the women they were free. Those with homes to return to could leave. Those with nowhere to go could come with us, and I'd find them somewhere safe. Most ran. A handful stayed. I called the Sioux sisters out and we all mounted up. Uncle, me, the rescued women, and the 2 new additions, and rode toward the county town as the sun went down. We rode back to the city. The battle was over. The remaining rebels had been wiped out, and over 1,000 surrendered soldiers were cleaning up the battlefield. Yin Xiu greeted us with deep gratitude. He led the troops into the city, warning the new men that anyone who bothered civilians would face military justice. The promise of hot food and wine was enough to keep them in line. That night, the military kitchen went all out, slaughtered pigs and sheep, barrel after barrel of wine. Yin Xiu, Magistrate Zhuang Song, Uncle, and I sat around a bonfire with the soldiers, drinking and eating together. They toasted us as the heroes of the battle. The ancient wine was weak stuff, and with my enhanced body, a dozen bowls didn't even make me dizzy. Half the soldiers around us were already passed out. Afterward, Yin Xiu brought us back to his estate for the night. The moment we walked through the door, Yin Shuang came bouncing over, beaming. She'd been terrified for days worrying about me. But her smile vanished the instant she spotted the Sioux sisters behind me. Her face cycled through several shades of emotion before she asked, stiffly, who they were. I explained they were rescued captives whose family had been killed by Yuan. She went quiet. Yin Xiu quickly stepped in to smooth things over, telling her to arrange rooms for everyone. She shuffled away, clearly upset, muttering under her breath. Later that night, Yin Xiu tried to comfort her, offering to find her a fine husband once things settled down. She snapped back immediately, I don't want that, and stormed off to her room. Yin Xiu sighed. He knew she'd set her heart on me and wasn't letting go. That night, the system rewarded me again for the Sioux sisters. Meanwhile, I slept like a rock. Next morning I woke late. The Sioux sisters helped me dress and wash up. Stepping outside, I ran into Yin Shuang. Dark circles under her eyes, clearly hadn't slept. She'd spent the whole night thinking. She asked me to come with her to talk privately. Apparently her brother's words had actually gotten through, not in the way he intended. She'd realized that in this chaotic world, any capable husband would have multiple wives. So why not choose someone she actually liked? And by her measure, I was the most impressive young man she'd ever met. She couldn't bring herself to say it in front of the Sioux sisters, so she pulled me to a pavilion by the garden pond and dismissed all the servants. It was the first time we'd ever been alone together. At the pavilion, Yin Shuang told me her brother wanted to find her a husband once things calmed down. I asked if she wanted to get married. She paused and said it depended on who. I decided to tease her. So who does the young lady want to marry? Her face went red, and she gave me a light punch on the arm. You already know. That was all I needed to hear. We didn't say much more. She composed herself, said goodbye, and went back inside. What I didn't know was that one of her maids had been hiding behind a pillar watching everything. She ran straight to the military camp and told Yin Xiu. When I found him after lunch to discuss business, he cut me off before I could even start. He said the Liang Dynasty was dead, so he wasn't a viscount anymore, and he already knew about me and his sister. I froze. So much for privacy. But he wasn't angry. He'd thought it through. With my strength and abilities, Yin Shuang would be safe with me. And if I ever achieved something great, being family would benefit everyone. He told me that once things stabilized, I could take her home. Then he called me brother-in-law. I grinned and called him big brother-in-law right back. He blinked. He'd never heard the term before, but he liked the sound of it. Then I got to the real business. I asked him for 500 of the surrendered soldiers to build my own elite force. That way, if enemies came again, I could strike from behind while he defended the city. He agreed immediately, without even thinking. After what Uncle and I had done in the battle, he owed us. Plus, we were family now. Splitting forces between 2 positions made strategic sense. He said I could pick whoever I wanted from the entire pool of prisoners. Even better. But then he brought up the tiger. Soldiers on the wall had seen it appear out of thin air. He wanted to know what was going on. I couldn't exactly explain storage spaces and systems. I bowed formally and told him I couldn't reveal it yet, but once I'd brought peace to the world, I'd tell him everything. Those words, "bring peace to the world," hung in the air. I said them casually, but I could see the impact hit him hard. He'd suspected I had bigger ambitions. Now he was sure. He connected the dots quickly. Chao Wang's death by wild beast, the tiger roar the night Huang Tong vanished, the officers who disappeared. All me. He didn't care about the method. He just wanted to know what kind of man he was dealing with. And now he knew. "Good," he said quietly. "Then I'll be waiting for that day." That afternoon, Yin Xiu and I went to the military camp and had all 1,600 prisoners assemble. Uncle and I walked through the ranks, pulling out the ones we wanted. The men got nervous. Some thought we were picking people to execute. Yin Xiu calmed them down and explained I was his brother-in-law, building a separate unit so we could defend from two positions. The soldiers I picked asked if the promise of 2 meals a day still applied. I told them straight, follow my orders, and 2 meals was just the baseline. Complete missions well or earn battle merit, and there'd be extra grain, money, and women as rewards. That lit a fire in their eyes. These men had been underfed, underpaid, and treated as second-class soldiers their whole careers. They swore loyalty on the spot, saying as long as I treated them like human beings, they'd fight whoever I pointed at. I selected 500, all battle-hardened veterans who'd survived the front lines. The moment they officially joined me, the system rewarded me. 500 stone of grain, 50 acceleration cards, 50 Tiger Yang pills, and 50,000 points. I nearly choked. I should have asked for more men. I said goodbye to Yin Xiu. He told me to train them into an elite force as fast as I could. I told him to send word if he ever needed help. He watched us march away with a knowing look. I think he sensed these 500 would accomplish more under me than 1,000 would under him. By evening, we reached the mountains behind the village. The villagers spotted the column of soldiers from above and panicked, grabbing weapons and preparing to fight. But then they saw Uncle and me at the front and relaxed. When I explained these were now our soldiers, jaws dropped across the camp. I'd left the village a few days ago and come back with a private army. Then the teasing started. The village women spotted the Sioux sisters and immediately guessed the situation. "More wives, Xiao Qian?" I just grinned and admitted it. My brothers gave me thumbs up. The older women clucked their tongues and warned me to pace myself. The village couldn't afford to lose me to exhaustion. Wanyang brought little Wan over. The girl threw herself at me shouting, "Daddy," and I scooped her up, heart full. My wives watched me carefully with the new additions, but seeing me still dote on the children and treat everyone the same, they relaxed. The pills had been working on them too. Their complexions had improved so much they were nearly as striking as the Sioux sisters, just without the fancy grooming. Then Lin Shulian walked up with her baby daughter. For the first time, she called me husband instead of little uncle. Just days ago she'd been my village sister-in-law. The shift sent an unexpected thrill through me. "You're still calling me sister-in-law?" She pouted when I slipped back into the old habit. I laughed. Force of habit. "But doesn't it have a nice ring to it?" She rolled her eyes, but I caught the hint of a smile. After one night in those cramped mountain shelters, I knew we needed a better plan. I gathered my 500 soldiers after breakfast and told them their first job wasn't training, it was construction. We'd build a proper village up in the mountains. The old village below would serve as a military outpost, an early warning station. I put Uncle and the village carpenters in charge of the building crews. The mountain had plenty of tall timber. We'd use wood for the main structures, pack the walls with clay, and add lime later if we could get some. Next, I called everyone together. The original villagers plus refugees from nearby villages who'd joined us. About 200 people total. I laid out my plan for the land. With Chao Wang dead and his family fled, all the surrounding farmland was unclaimed. I proposed collective farming. Everyone works together, shares the harvest equally, and when things stabilize, I'd work with the county magistrate to divide the land permanently based on how much each person contributed. Work more, get more. People loved it. The promise of owning their own land someday was all the motivation they needed. Then came the big reveal. I told them I'd found some high-yield crop seeds in the enemy camp and learned how to grow them from an expert. I brought everyone down to my old courtyard where I'd pulled huge piles of seeds from my storage, improved rice, corn, and potatoes. They recognized the rice. though they noticed the grains were bigger and fuller than anything they'd seen. The corn kernels and potato tubers were completely alien to them. I explained corn first, grind it into flour, make flatbread, tastes amazing. When I told them it could yield 6 to 700 pounds per acre, the crowd went dead silent. In their experience, 300 pounds per acre was considered a great harvest. They thought I was crazy. Most people defaulted to the rice. At least they knew what that was. I didn't push them on corn, but I pointed at the potatoes and dropped the real bomb. 1,000 pounds per acre, minimum. Total silence. Then disbelief. If something like that existed, why would anyone starve? They held the potatoes in their hands, turning them over, genuinely unsure if these lumpy things were even food. Words weren't going to convince them, so I took action. I had 300 pounds of corn ground into flour at the village stone mills and 300 pounds of potatoes carried up the mountain. When the women started cooking lunch and realized they had no idea what to do with either ingredient, I showed them the simplest methods. Boil the potatoes whole in big pots. Mix the corn flour with water into flat cakes and toast them slowly on the pan lids. Everyone watched skeptically. Some were already mentally prepared to skip lunch. Then the corn cakes started browning. A smell none of them had ever encountered drifted through the camp. Rich, warm, golden. One by one, people started swallowing hard. Nobody was talking about skipping lunch anymore. The mountain shelters were miserable, so I decided to build a proper village up in the mountains. I put my 500 soldiers to work alongside the carpenters, cutting timber and constructing wooden houses that we'd later seal with clay and lime. The old village below would stay as a military base and lookout post. Then I gathered all 200 civilians, our original villagers plus refugees who joined us, and laid out the farming plan. With Chao Wang dead and gone, all the surrounding land was unclaimed. I proposed collective farming. Everyone works together, shares the food, and later when things settle, each family gets permanent ownership of land based on how much they contributed. The promise of future land ownership was the key. It would keep people motivated and prevent freeloading. Next came the new crops. I told everyone I'd found high-yield seeds in the enemy camp and learned the growing methods from an expert. I brought out piles of improved rice, corn, and potato seeds. The rice they recognized. The grains were just bigger and plumper. The corn and potatoes were completely foreign. When I said corn could yield 6 to 700 pounds per acre, people thought I was insane. Their best harvests barely hit 300. When I said potatoes could do 1,000 pounds per acre, they went silent, then argued it was impossible. Most people wanted to stick with rice. Words weren't working, so I had 300 pounds of corn ground into flour and 300 pounds of potatoes boiled for lunch. We made simple corn flatbread on the pans. When the smell of toasting corn cakes filled the air, every skeptic in camp started swallowing hard. After one bite of the golden, crispy bread and the soft, warm potatoes, everyone was convinced. By afternoon, they were begging me to teach them how to plant both crops. I showed them the technique. Cut potatoes into pieces with the sprouting eyes intact, dry them a day, mix with ash fertilizer, plant every 6 or 7 inches. For corn, drop 3 seeds per hole, 10 inches apart. Simple enough. Within days, the whole community was working the fields with an energy I'd never seen. Meanwhile, news of the battle at Qing County spread across the region and got wildly exaggerated. People were saying a god had descended with an ancient beast that killed thousands with a single swipe. The stories attracted desperate refugees from everywhere. Floods of people started pouring toward Qing County. Yan Xiu and Magistrate Zhuang Song were overwhelmed. They didn't have enough grain to feed their own people, let alone thousands of newcomers. Refugees were dying of hunger outside the city walls every day. The two officials tried everything but couldn't find a solution. Women were begging soldiers for scraps to feed their starving children. Finally, Yin Xiu remembered what I told him. If he ever had a problem he couldn't solve, come find me. He grabbed Yin Shuang and rode out to the village. She'd been upset that I hadn't visited, but when she saw me covered in mud from the fields, her annoyance melted into tenderness. She got straight to the point. There are so many refugees. My brother and the magistrate are out of ideas. Can you help them? How many refugees? I asked. Over 3,000, after the ones who've already starved to death, Yin Xiu replied. The system chimed in immediately, a new quest. For every 100 refugees I took in and kept alive, I get 100 stone of grain, 10 acceleration cards, 1,000 points, and 10 Tiger Yang pills. Taking in refugees counted as expanding my power. Perfect. I didn't hesitate. I'll take all 3,000. Both of them stared at me. Yin Shuang grabbed my arm, worried I was overextending myself. I explained my thinking. I wouldn't just feed them for free. That breeds resentment over time. I'd put them to work farming the empty land left behind after the raids. I'd provide food until the first harvest and even pay wages. People need to feel like life has a future, or they'll riot. Keep them busy, keep them fed, keep them hopeful. Yin Xiu's eyes lit up. Then he noticed what our villagers were planting and asked about the strange crops. I walked him through corn and potatoes, the yields, the growing seasons, the fact that potatoes could produce 1,000 pounds per acre and be harvested twice a year. His jaw dropped. He finally understood why I was so confident. He asked where these crops came from. I fed him the same story I'd given the villagers, found references in an old book, then discovered actual seeds among goods the bandits had stolen from traveling merchants. He bought it. Something clicked behind his eyes. If these crops were real, and I could scale them up, I'd have more food than anyone in the region. With unlimited grain, I could rally an army just by raising my hand. He suddenly understood that my talk of bringing peace to the world wasn't empty boasting. He started laughing to himself for no apparent reason. Then he composed himself and told Yin Shuang she should stay with me for a few days while he went back to handle the refugee logistics. She turned red and protested, but he was already on his horse, grinning, riding away with his guards. He'd basically just dropped his sister off at my doorstep. I took her hand and walked her up the mountain for lunch. That afternoon, Yin Xiu sent 200 soldiers with wagons. I had the grain ready. By evening, huge pots of porridge were boiling outside the city walls. Thousands of refugees watched with desperate eyes as soldiers kept order. Yin Xiu climbed the wall and addressed the crowd. He told them the food came from his brother-in-law, Lu Qian, and that anyone willing to work could follow me tomorrow for guaranteed daily meals. When he asked if they were willing, 3,000 voices answered as one, yes. They wept as they ate. Most hadn't tasted real porridge in weeks. But while things were looking up for us, trouble was brewing far away. 1,000 miles north in the provincial capital, Chao Wang's surviving family had reached the mansion of a powerful official, a relative of the dead magistrate Huang Tong. They threw themselves at his feet, sobbing, begging him to avenge their murdered kin. 3,000 refugees, and the system was offering rewards for every 100 I kept alive. I told Yin Xiu I'd take them all. He and Yin Shuang were stunned, but I laid out my plan. The surrounding villages had been emptied by the raids, leaving vast tracts of farmland with nobody to work them. I'd feed the refugees until harvest, put them to work immediately, and even pay wages. People who see a future don't riot. I showed Yin Xiu the corn and potato fields. When I explained the yields, his jaw dropped. He finally understood why I was so calm about feeding thousands. I gave him the story about finding the seeds in the bandit loot and learning about them from old books. He didn't question it. Something shifted in his eyes. He was starting to see the bigger picture. Unlimited food meant unlimited followers. He laughed to himself, then announced he had to rush back to organize the relief effort. Before leaving, he casually told Yin Shuang to stay with me for a few days. She blushed and protested, but he was already galloping away with a knowing grin. He'd basically gift-wrapped his sister and left her at my door. That evening, Yin Xiu's soldiers set up massive cooking pots outside the city walls. When the porridge was ready, he climbed the wall and announced to the crowd that the food came from his brother-in-law, Lu Qian, and that anyone willing to work could come to me for guaranteed meals. 3,000 voices cried out yes. People wept into their bowls as they ate. Meanwhile, things were moving in places I didn't know about yet. Far away in the provincial capital, Chao Wang's surviving son had found Huang Tong's uncle, a powerful fourth-rank official named Huang Fa. He told the whole story of how I'd used a tiger to kill his father and how Huang Tong had vanished the same night. Huang Fa was furious, but also calculating. He knew I'd killed Qin Ba from Black Wind Stronghold, the son of the powerful Qin military family. He figured the Qin generals would want revenge too, and he wouldn't even need to lift a finger. Even further away, in the territory of the king of Chu, a warlord named Liang Shaoheng, who controlled vast lands with 600,000 elite soldiers, a spy had returned from our region. He'd been trapped in Qing County during the siege and witnessed the whole battle. When he described how 2 riders smashed through 3,000 soldiers and how a giant tiger appeared from thin air, the king of Chu became very interested. He called for his chief strategist, a famous scholar named Baitzen, and asked him to travel to Qing County personally to investigate and recruit us. Back home, the village elders had built me a 3-story wooden house with over a dozen rooms as thanks for saving everyone. That evening, with Yin Shuang settled in and the refugees on their way, I was in my new home with Lin Shilian, finally claiming the reward I'd been waiting for. Far away, things were moving against me without my knowledge. Huang Fa, the powerful uncle of the dead magistrate Huang Tong, heard the whole story from Chao Wang's surviving son. He was furious, but smart enough to know I was too dangerous to handle personally. He went straight to General Qin's family, the military dynasty whose son Qin Ba I'd killed at Black Wind Stronghold. The old General Qin Xiong went mad with grief and rage. He wanted to mobilize his army immediately, but his 2 older sons stopped him. Since surrendering to the barbarian invaders, the Qin family no longer controlled their own troops. Moving soldiers without permission from the barbarian commander could get them executed for treason. The barbarian marshal refused to waste resources attacking a tiny county. But Qin Xiong wasn't giving up. He summoned his household's elite assassins, killers trained since childhood for exactly this kind of work, and ordered 50 of them to go to my village, break my limbs, and drag me back alive. Meanwhile, 800 miles away, the king of Chu had also heard about me. His spy had been trapped in Qing County during the siege and witnessed everything. The king was fascinated, 2 riders smashing through thousands of soldiers, a tiger appearing from nowhere. He sent his top strategist to investigate and recruit me. None of this had reached me yet. I was busy with the refugees. When the column of 3,000 people arrived, led by Magistrate Zhuang Song, I gathered my 500 soldiers and went to meet them at the village entrance. I climbed up where everyone could see me and addressed the crowd. I'm Lu Qian, and from now on, I'm your boss. Zhuang Song nearly spit out his tea, said it sounded like a bandit recruitment speech. I laid out the deal. Every person gets 1 pound of grain per day and 100 coins monthly wage. In exchange, they farm for me. First 3 years, all harvest is mine. After 3, we split 50-50. After 5 years, the land becomes theirs permanently. Not a single person objected. They'd expected thin porridge and prayers. Instead, they were getting food, pay, and the promise of their own land. They cheered until their voices gave out. Then I turned to my soldiers. I told them to put away their weapons, straighten up, and face the crowd. They were confused but obeyed. I reminded them of my promise, that I'd make sure they were fed, clothed, and married. The food and clothing were handled. Now it was time for wives. I knew that full bellies weren't enough to truly bind soldiers to you. Give a man a family, and he has something to protect, something to fight for. He won't desert, won't betray you. And among these 3,000 refugees, there were plenty of single women who needed safety and stability just as badly as my soldiers needed companionship. It was a perfect match. When I told the soldiers I was getting them wives, they blinked at me in confusion. Then I pointed at the refugee women. Understanding dawned. They asked if it was really appropriate. I just grinned and asked if they wanted wives or not. 500 voices answered together. Yes. I cleared my throat and addressed the refugees. I laid out exactly what being a soldier's wife meant. Their husbands got 2 and a half pounds of food daily, 1 string of cash monthly, meat with lunch once training started, medical care if wounded, and if they died in service, I'd support the family. Any woman who married one of my men got the same benefits. The crowd went silent, then exploded. The deal was better than serving in the old Imperial Army. Women started stepping forward, faces flushed. I'll marry. Me too. Hundreds came out of the crowd. The soldiers lined up facing them, and for the first time since I'd known these men, they looked genuinely moved. They told me they'd follow me to hell and back. In the old army, they'd been expendable cannon fodder, constantly hungry, never paid. Now someone was actually treating them like people. One by one, each soldier walked up and took a woman's hand. It was the strangest mass wedding I'd ever seen, but it worked. The men who didn't get chosen, because the remaining women were older, looked disappointed. The women who weren't picked sighed with regret. But the main goal was accomplished. My soldiers now had families, roots, reasons to stay loyal and fight hard. I handed the refugee placement over to Magistrate Zhuang Song, who'd already mapped out which villages needed workers. As groups were sent to different locations, the system kept chiming, rewards for every batch of refugees settled. By the time everyone was placed, I'd earned over 3,700 stone of grain, 372 acceleration cards, 372 Tiger Yang pills, and 37,200 points. The system was essentially paying me to take in people. I spent nothing from my own reserves. I immediately burned through the acceleration cards on my storage space farmland. The yields were staggering. System-grown potatoes hit nearly 10,000 pounds per acre. I started shipping cartloads of grain to every village. Zhuang Song was grinning ear to ear. I told him to keep accepting refugees, however many Xing County could hold. Take them all. He agreed without hesitation. I could see the calculation in his eyes. He was betting his career on me, and he knew it. Experienced villagers were sent to teach the newcomers how to plant corn and potatoes. Within 2 weeks, the mountain village reconstruction was complete. Every refugee had a roof, a job, and food. Now it was time to build my army. I gathered the 500 soldiers and had Uncle lead them down to my old house in the village. When they opened the courtyard gate, every man froze. The entire yard was packed with rows of gleaming silver armor, 500 sets of heavy plate, polished bright. Beside them stood 500 matching silver spears, lined up perfectly, flashing in the morning sun. The soldiers had already been using the steel swords and crossbows I'd given them earlier, but when they saw the courtyard full of armor and spears, their eyes went wide. I'd chosen Liang Dynasty heavy infantry plate, 1,800 steel scales per suit, full neck and face protection with only a slit for the eyes. True head-to-toe armor. Each set weighed 60 pounds, and the matching spears were another 50. The excitement faded fast once they tried putting it all on. 100+ pounds of gear had them groaning. They told me the equipment was amazing, but too heavy to actually fight in. I just smiled and told them to follow me to the training ground. I punched a stone in the courtyard, just 20% of my strength, and it exploded into pieces. 500 men stared at me like I was something not quite human. I asked if they wanted that kind of power. Every head nodded. At the training field, Uncle and I handed each man a single Tiger Yang pill. I took one myself first to show it was safe, then warned them. Anyone who breathed a word about these pills to outsiders would be ground to dust. To make the point clear, I punched a tree as thick as a barrel. It snapped at the base and toppled over, roots and all. Nobody had any questions after that. They swallowed the pills. Seconds later, every man was on his knees, clutching his stomach, drenched in sweat, groaning in agony. The same burning I'd felt my first time. But it passed quickly. When they stood up, everything had changed. The armor that had crushed them minutes ago now felt like clothing. The heavy spears were toys. 500 soldiers, each with the strength of a tiger. I handed training over to Uncle. He'd fully mastered the Warlord spear technique by now and would teach it to every man. I told the soldiers this spear art, combined with the pills, could turn each of them into warriors capable of fighting 100 men alone. Train hard, sweat now, bleed less in battle. They dropped to one knee in a perfect military salute and swore to follow my orders without question. I gave them 1 month. After that, I'd test everyone and promote the best performers to officer positions with extra rewards. They threw themselves into training like men possessed. With the army training, the refugees settled, the crops planted, and the village rebuilt. Life finally calmed down. For the first time since arriving in this world, I had a quiet evening. I came home to find all my wives bustling around. Tea ready, dinner on the table, hot water drawn for washing. They fussed over me like I was the center of their world. This was exactly what I'd been fighting for. After dinner, Yin Shuang's 2 maids brought me a basin of warm water. The journey toward collecting all my rewards was long, but I was more than willing to put in the work. Half a month flew by. I'd taken in nearly 5,000 more refugees, pushing Xing County's population higher than it had ever been, even during the dynasty's peak. I now had over 7,000 workers farming the land, and the system had rewarded me handsomely for every batch. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. I'd check on training in the morning, tour the villages with my wives in the afternoon, inspect the crops. Then a messenger from Yin Xiu's estate shattered the calm. Officials from the barbarian-controlled Rome prefecture were coming to take over Qing County. This was serious. I knew Yanqiu would never submit to foreign rule. Neither would I. My private army alone was enough to get my entire family executed under any dynasty's laws. The moment I'd started building my forces, I'd already committed to rebellion. If it came to it, I was ready. Yin Shuang wanted to go home to see her mother, so we rode together toward the city. I told Uncle not to bother sending guards. After weeks of daily Tiger Yang pills, I was confident no ordinary threat could touch me. My senses, strength, and reflexes had all pushed far beyond human limits. What I didn't know was that the road ahead was a trap. The Qin family's elite assassins, 50 highly trained killers led by a man called Flying Sand, had been lurking near Qing County for days, studying my movements. They'd seen the messenger ride to my village and guessed I'd be heading to the city. They set up in a wooded stretch of the road with poisoned arrows, under orders to cripple me and bring me back alive. Hidden behind them on another hilltop was a completely separate group, nearly 100 elite soldiers from the King of Chu, escorting his strategist by San. They'd been tailing the assassins, watching, waiting to see what would happen. Baitzen wanted to test whether I was truly as powerful as the rumors claimed. If I handled the assassins easily, he'd approach me. If I died, then I wasn't worth recruiting anyway. I was riding ahead of Yin Shuang with one of her guards in front. When we got within 100 meters of the ambush, Flying Sand gave the order to shoot. But I heard everything. The whispered command, the bowstrings vibrating, the arrows cutting through air. After consuming so many pills, my senses had become something inhuman. I pinpointed their position instantly. 2 arrows streaked toward me. Time seemed to slow. I reached out and snatched both from the air. Their tips stopped less than 2 inches from my body and Yin Shuang behind me. The guard ahead wasn't so lucky. 2 arrows hit him, one through the heart, one through the neck. He was dead before he hit the ground. Yin Shuang gasped. Every hidden watcher, the assassins in the trees, the Chu soldiers on the ridge, all drew the same sharp breath. Someone had just caught poisoned arrows out of the air with his bare hands. And he didn't even look surprised. I saw the black substance on the arrowheads, and my blood went cold. Poison. These people weren't just trying to capture me. They wanted me helpless. Rage surged through me. I flicked the arrows back toward where they'd come from, putting my full strength behind the throw. 2 screams echoed from the trees. 2 of them went down instantly, bodies punched clean through. I grabbed Yin Shuang, leaped off the horse, and set her down safely. Find somewhere to hide. Then I summoned my heavy sword from the storage space and shot toward the assassins like a shadow. By the time they looked up, I was already among them. There were about 50 skilled fighters, faster and stronger than ordinary soldiers. But against me, they were nothing. I unleashed the 9 swords of Dugu for the first time in real combat. The forest was tight, so the spear would have been awkward, but the sword was perfect. Every swing was devastating. The heavy blade combined with the elegant technique made each strike both beautiful and absolutely lethal. Heads separated from bodies. Men were cut in half at the waist. Limbs flew. Within minutes, the trees around us looked like they'd been painted red. In less than 15 minutes, more than half of them were dead. The remaining 20-something survivors backed away, terrified, gripping their weapons with shaking hands. Their leader, a man I'd later learn was called Flying Sand, signaled retreat. They scattered in every direction. I cursed and chased the leader. He was fast, but I was faster. I circled ahead of him through the trees and stopped right in his path. He slammed into me like hitting a wall. Before he could recover, I had him by the throat, feet dangling off the ground. He tried to swing his sword at my arm. I caught the blade with my bare hand and crushed it to pieces. He went limp with despair. I demanded to know who sent them. He spat and told me to kill him. I shattered his shoulder with one punch. He screamed, but still refused to talk. I realized these were probably household assassins, raised from childhood, brainwashed into absolute loyalty. He'd rather die than betray his master. Fine. I snapped his neck. Then I heard fighting nearby. I rushed over and found a completely different group of armed men finishing off the remaining assassins. Over 100 of them, well organized, clearly elite soldiers. I had no idea where they'd come from. A man in white robes stepped forward, holding a feathered fan, and bowed to me with a warm smile. My name is Baitzen. I've heard much about you, Brother Lu Qian. Forgive me for arriving uninvited. I kept my guard up as the man in white robes introduced himself. Baitzen, strategist to the King of Chu. The 100-plus fighters behind him were the king's personal elite guards. They'd followed the assassins here and helped clean up the ones who'd scattered. I didn't know much about the King of Chu beyond what Yin Xiu had mentioned, a warlord 800 miles south with the largest army of any regional power. Why he was interested in me, I had no idea. Baitzen didn't push. He simply asked if he could travel with us to meet Yin Xiu, since he had business with him too. I didn't refuse. He seemed harmless enough. A cultured scholar, nothing like the weasel-faced strategist from Blackwind Stronghold. I collected Yin Shuang from her hiding spot, and we all headed for the city. When we arrived, Yin Xiu saw the blood on me and the dead guard's body and demanded to know what happened. I explained the ambush. He immediately pinpointed the Qin family as the culprits. They had every reason to want me dead, and only a great house could field 50 trained assassins. He cursed General Qin with genuine hatred. The man had surrendered to the barbarians, gotten Yin Xiu's uncles killed in the process, and now was sending killers after me. Once inside, Baitzen got to the point. The barbarians were about to establish a new dynasty and had sent officials to take control of Xing County. The King of Chu, as a direct descendant of the old Liang imperial bloodline, wanted to resist. He'd heard about our exploits and was offering a partnership if we killed the incoming barbarian. Administrators and proved we were on the same side. The king would station 100,000 soldiers in our area, fully supplied with his own grain, and let Yin Xiu and me command them. I saw through it immediately. The king wanted to use us as a foothold to gradually swallow Shu territory. Station troops, absorb local forces, expand outward. Classic annexation strategy. But I also saw opportunity. I had no intention of serving anyone. My past life as a wage slave was enough. But right now, I needed those soldiers. With 100,000 men, I could strike before the barbarians came for us, seize surrounding cities, build my reputation, and attract even more followers. Let the King of Chu think he was using me. I'd be using him right back. After a quick discussion with Yin Xiu and Magistrate Zhuang Song, I made a counter-proposal. Instead of killing the barbarian officials right away, we should pretend to submit. Let the enemy think Xing County had fallen in line. Meanwhile, the King of Chu could quietly move his forces into Shu territory unopposed. When the time was right, we'd strike, take Rome Prefecture and every city around it before the barbarians knew what hit them. Baitzen's eyes lit up. He thought his recruitment was halfway done. He eagerly agreed. We'd wait for the barbarians to focus on establishing their new dynasty, then hand them a nasty surprise. Everyone in the room was smiling. Everyone had their own plans. And none of us were being completely honest about what we really wanted. So both sides struck a deal, each planning to use the other. Baitzen rushed back to deliver the good news to the King of Chu. We began preparing for the handover. Magistrate Zhuang Song happily stepped aside when the new barbarian-appointed officials arrived. He treated it like a vacation and went home to sleep. But the real trouble came when Yin Xiu and I went to hand over the garrison. The barbarian delegation included about a dozen foreign soldiers led by a new military commander, plus 2 Chinese turncoats appointed as magistrate and deputy. The moment those barbarians spotted Yin Shuang behind me, their eyes locked on like wolves. They started making filthy comments about her right in front of us, saying they were bored of the refugee women they'd been assaulting on the road. One of them reached for her. That sealed their fate. I stepped in front of my wife with Yin Xiu, blocking them. He told them coldly she was his sister and already married. They backed off, barely, because the garrison hadn't been formally transferred yet. The handover happened. Yin Xiu gave them the command token and the 1,000-man garrison. But when he tried to leave with his own personal troops, a few hundred men, the barbarian commander blocked him and demanded he surrender those soldiers too. Yin Xiu refused. Things escalated fast. The commander waved the token and ordered the garrison to arrest Yin Xiu for treason. Dead silence. Not a single soldier moved. These men had been conquered and humiliated by the barbarians, lost their homes, and only survived because of us. That token meant nothing compared to the loyalty they felt toward Yin Xiu and me. I stepped forward and the temperature in the room dropped. The commander tried threatening to execute their families. Bad move. Most of these soldiers had already lost everyone to the barbarian invasion. The hatred in their eyes was primal. The commander pointed his finger at Yin Xiu and started threatening to report back to his superiors. I didn't let him finish. My blade flashed, and his right hand hit the ground, severed clean at the wrist. "Pick up your hand," I told him. "Pick it up." The garrison soldiers swarmed the dozen barbarians instantly, disarming them all. The deputy commander tried to talk his way out, saying they'd leave peacefully. I laughed in his face. Nobody was leaving. I couldn't let them report back to Rome Prefecture. The soldiers dragged the barbarians away. I heard one squad leader call over the biggest, meanest man in the unit and hand the prisoners over for special treatment. The screams that followed were creative. I moved fast. We needed to lock down the entire city before word got out. I ordered soldiers to surround the county office and the inn where the barbarian officials' families were staying. Not one person could escape. Yin Xiu and I burst into the county office where the two Chinese collaborators, the new magistrate and deputy, sat behind their desks. I slammed my sword into the table, and Yin Xiu roared at them to write a report to Rome Prefecture, saying the handover went smoothly and everything was normal. "Write it now or die?" The new magistrate was shaking so badly he could barely hold his brush, but he wrote the letter exactly as ordered. A report to Rome Prefecture saying the handover went perfectly and everything was normal. When he tried to resign and leave, Yin Xiu sat him back down. He'd stay in his position, do his job quietly, and if he cooperated, he'd be fine, maybe even prosper. The man realized he was being pulled onto a sinking ship with no way off. His family was here too. He sighed and accepted. We sent the fake report to the courier station. Then the soldiers brought in the barbarian officials' families, over 100 people, far more than expected. Yin Xiu didn't hesitate with the foreign men and their half-blood children. They were executed in the street. After what the barbarians had done to our people, the emperor strangled, princesses tortured to death in military camps, entire cities burned. Nobody in the crowd shed a tear. The Chinese women among the captives were a different story. Many had been kidnapped, daughters of officials, girls from wealthy families, ordinary refugees. They'd been forced into marriages with barbarian soldiers and treated like animals. They knelt trembling, begging for their lives. I stepped forward and told them to stand up. Nobody was killing them. I gave them a choice: leave freely or come back to our village for food, shelter, and honest work. Every single one chose to stay. Some cried so hard they couldn't speak. The townspeople watching nodded in approval. We loaded the women onto ox carts and headed home. Yin Shuang leaned against my shoulder during the ride, quiet and grateful. She pointed out that some of the rescued women were clearly from good families, refined features, elegant bearing even through the dirt and exhaustion. She suggested I pick a few as maids for my other wives. I glanced back and felt the old temptation stir, but I told her we'd figure it out later. On the way, I stopped at the ambush site from that morning. The forest still reeked of blood. I stored all the assassin corpses into my space as food for the tiger. It had been over a month since I'd tamed it, and with regular tiger yang pills, the beast had nearly doubled in size, close to 1,000 pounds now. Its intelligence had grown too. It understood my commands perfectly. Send it after a boar and it wouldn't touch a deer. I'd even had to remake its armor from 2 sets of horse plates stitched together because it had outgrown the first set. This tiger was my secret weapon, and I intended to keep feeding it and growing its power. Over the next 7 days, the system rewards kept rolling in from the rescued women and ongoing activities. My farm expanded massively. The system itself leveled up to Tier 3. Each reward now granted 80 acres of farmland, and everything else doubled too. My stockpile of pills, points, and acceleration cards was growing faster than I could spend them. While I was busy at home building my forces and settling refugees, events were unfolding far away that I wouldn't learn about until later. Baitzen rode hard back to Chu territory, cutting a 10-day journey to 7. He told the king of Chu everything. The ambush, how I caught poisoned arrows out of the air, how I slaughtered 50 elite assassins single-handedly. The king was ecstatic. He paced around his hall like a child with a new toy, declaring me the fiercest young warrior he'd ever heard of. He even asked Baitzen how I'd match up against the barbarian's secret weapon, some monstrous creature they'd used when taking the capital, said to be 10 feet tall, chained up like a mindless killing machine. Baitzen thought carefully and said I might lose in raw strength, but would be faster and more skilled. A real fight could go either way. The king nearly jumped out of his chair. But when Baitzin mentioned that I'd taken in nearly 10,000 refugees and had the common people singing my praises, the king's excitement cooled. He recognized the pattern. I wasn't just a fighter. I was building a following, winning hearts, gathering power. That meant ambition. And ambitious men are dangerous to control. That night, the king couldn't sleep. He decided I was useful but needed to be kept on a leash. Instead of sending his elite veteran army as promised, he picked a force of 100,000 soldiers from his worst units, former enemy troops he'd captured when conquering neighboring territories. Badly equipped, poorly trained, treated like disposable trash. He figured this accomplished several things. It honored the letter of his promise, dumped his weakest soldiers on someone else, and ensured I'd burn through resources trying to feed and equip them. If I fought the barbarians and both sides bled each other dry, even better. Baitzin saw what was happening, and his heart sank. This wasn't what he'd promised me. The supply support had been quietly dropped too. He realized he'd praised me too enthusiastically and triggered the king's suspicious nature. He sighed to himself. His lord was capable in many ways, but petty and short-sighted when it mattered most. The army marched under a general named Yu Huai, a former enemy commander who'd surrendered to the king of Chu years ago. On the road, Yu Huai figured out exactly what was going on. He and his men were expendable pawns being thrown at a problem the king didn't want to waste real resources on. Yu Huai just hoped that whoever was waiting for them in Xing County would treat his soldiers better than the king of Chu ever had. 3 days after this army departed, the barbarian leader officially declared himself emperor in the old capital, founding a new dynasty called De Yuan and naming his reign Wanqing. The world had a new overlord, and a new enemy for everyone who refused to kneel. A month had passed, and it was time to test my soldiers. Word from Yanxiu said Rong Prefecture was planning to send more garrison troops to Xing County. Once they arrived, our whole setup would be exposed, and war would follow. The good news was that the king of Chu's army had departed 7 days ago. If they reached us before the barbarians did, I could strike first, seize Rong Prefecture and the surrounding counties before anyone knew what hit them. But first, I needed to know exactly what my 500 men could do. Uncle and I arrived at the training ground early. The transformation was obvious. These weren't the same ragged, hungry deserters I'd picked up a month ago. Now they stood in full heavy armor with silver spears, eyes hard, bodies radiating killing intent. Every one of them had been forged in real battlefields and then enhanced with Tiger Yang pills and a month of brutal drilling. I explained the rules, split into 5 groups of 100, one-on-one fights using wooden sticks dipped in red paint instead of real weapons. Get paint on your opponent's vital spots, and they're out. Last man standing in each round advances. No ganging up. The final winner becomes a centurion, 2nd through 10th become squad leaders, and so on. The top prize? More Tiger Yang pills. The crowd went wild. These pills had changed their lives in every way. Strength, health, stamina. Their new wives adored them for it. Some women had even gone out and found additional wives for their husbands just to keep them happy. Everyone wanted more pills. The fights kicked off, and the training ground erupted. Wooden sticks cracked against armor, men shouted battle cries, spectators screamed encouragement for their friends. It was chaotic, loud, and incredibly entertaining. Since everyone had learned the same Overlord spear technique from Uncle, many fights turned into mirror matches, 2 men using identical moves, unable to break through each other's defense. One pair got so frustrated they agreed to drop the technique and fight freestyle. The moment one of them actually did, the other used the opening to win with a textbook first form. The loser cursed him for being a dirty trickster. Another veteran named Old Lu figured out he could talk opponents into abandoning proper form, then beat them easily. He tricked 4 or 5 men this way before someone caught on. That someone was Lin Xinji, a quiet, intense young man around 23 or 24. He deliberately used the unpainted end of his stick against Old Lu, beating him with over a dozen strikes that left no marks, just bruises. Lu surrendered in pain. I'd been watching Lin Xinji closely. His spear technique was the most polished in the entire unit, smooth, precise, creating a wall of defense that nobody could penetrate. Uncle confirmed he'd been the hardest-working trainee from day one. Apparently, he came from a military family, generations of soldiers, his father a minor officer in the old Liang army. He was quiet and kept to himself, but his skill spoke volumes. I marked him and the other top performers in my mind. These were the men I'd invest in heavily. More pills, more training, more responsibility. Each one had the potential to become a commander capable of leading their own forces in the battles ahead. The tournament ended with 5 champions: Lin Xinji, Yu Yu, Wang Ming, Zhu Ying, and Zhou Tingyan. I promoted them to centurions on the spot, 5 strings of cash monthly, 5 pounds of food daily for their families. Then I pulled out 25 Tiger Yang pills and gave each of them 5. The crowd lost it. Everyone else was kicking themselves for not training harder. The runners-up, 2nd through 10th in each group, got 3 pills each. Even the squad leaders and regular soldiers who'd performed well got 1 pill apiece. The entire training camp erupted into celebration. Men were pledging eternal loyalty, promising to follow me anywhere, even joking about collecting beautiful women for me across the land. I laughed and told them to save the flattery for after they'd won some real battles. They swallowed their pills immediately. Since most were still in the early stages of pill consumption, the boost was dramatic, far more powerful than what I experienced now after taking so many. Every man could feel the surge of new strength. They were itching for a real fight. I gave Uncle a handful too, about a dozen. He tried to refuse, saying 5 or 6 pills had already made him incredibly strong. I pushed them into his hand. If we were going to conquer the world, I needed him at his absolute peak. Then I rode to the city to meet Yin Xiao. He'd prepared battle flags, a bright yellow royal banner with the word Liang for the old dynasty, plus personal command flags for each of us in red and white with our family names in bold black. The royal banner looked impressive, but I had a different idea. I asked him why we'd fight under a dead dynasty's name. The Liang Empire fell because its rulers were corrupt and lost the people's trust. Why rally behind a symbol that already failed? He was stumped. Then what do we fight for? I told him we fight for the people, not for kings or nobles or the old order. We tell the common folk that we're here to free them from barbarian oppression and corrupt landlords, win their hearts, and we'd have more soldiers than any noble house could muster. Once we had enough people behind us, we could crush every aristocratic family that had been bleeding the peasants dry for centuries. The common people would happily divide up their stolen wealth and land. Yin Xiao's eyes lit up like torches. He'd spent years watching parasitic nobles suck the life out of ordinary people. The idea of turning that whole system upside down thrilled him to the core. We agreed to redesign the banner. This wouldn't be a restoration. It would be something entirely new. Before I left, I took him to the back garden, sent all the servants away, and handed him 3 Tiger Yang pills. I explained what they were. 1 pill equals the strength of a tiger, 1 per day maximum, and warned him about the side effects. His eyes went wide. He'd suspected I had some secret behind my power. Now he was holding it in his palm. He swallowed one. The burning hit, but as a second-rate general his body handled it far better than most. When the pain faded, he punched a training sandbag so hard it exploded. He bowed to me with genuine gratitude. I waved it off. We were family. Then I grinned and asked if he was feeling a certain fire in his belly that was hard to control. His face went red. He stammered an excuse and practically sprinted to his wife's room. I just laughed. Every man who takes that pill goes through the same thing. 5 days later, the Chu army's advance scouts reached our border. Yin Xiao and I rode out with 1,000 garrison troops to meet them. What I saw made my stomach drop. These weren't the elite soldiers Baitzen had promised. 100,000 men stumbled toward us like walking corpses, starving, exhausted, barely able to stand. Their general, Yu Huai, was a weathered man in his 40s who looked like he was carrying the weight of the world. He pulled us aside and confessed everything. The king of Chu had given them only 12 days of food for a journey that took 15 through brutal mountain passes. Hundreds had fallen off cliffs from weakness. They'd been out of food for 2 days. No supply train was coming. No reinforcements. The king had deliberately sent his worst, most neglected troops, former prisoners of war from a conquered kingdom, and basically thrown them away. I wanted to strangle by send 10,000 elite soldiers with full logistics, he'd said. What I got was 100,000 starving ghosts with broken equipment and zero support. That smooth-talking scholar had outpainted even my big pictures. Yu Huai dropped to one knee and offered me his command token, begging me to feed his men. He didn't care about pride or rank. He just wanted his brothers to live. The instant I took that token, the system exploded with notifications. It registered all 99,000 soldiers as mine. The reward was beyond anything I'd ever received. Over 99,000 stone of grain, nearly 10,000 acceleration cards, almost 10,000 Tiger Yang pills, and close to 1,000,000 points. My hands were shaking. I told you why not to worry. As long as I had food, his men would eat. We immediately launched a massive supply operation. Every cart, horse, and pair of hands in the area hauling grain to the army's camp. By nightfall, huge pots of thick white rice porridge were bubbling across the town. When the soldiers saw actual white rice, not the husk-covered millet slop they were used to, many of them started crying. A skinny teenager asked his officer if he could have a second half-bowl. The officer looked at Yu Huai, unsure. I walked over, filled a bowl myself, and put it in the boy's hands. Eat up. There's plenty. We'll cook more if we run out. Yu Huai and his officers watched me with something new in their eyes. They'd been treated like garbage for years. Now someone was feeding their men white rice and telling them there was more. But I noticed something else. A small group of men in the crowd were whispering to each other, glancing around nervously. One of them slipped away into the darkness. My hearing caught the words, "Report to His Highness the King of Chu, the King's spies, embedded in the army to watch me." I set down my bowl. I'm full. Going to take a walk. I circled around and followed them into the night. I caught the King's spies within minutes. They died before they could make a sound. I fed their bodies to the tiger and walked back to camp like nothing happened. After a night's rest, the army marched to Xing County. 100,000 men couldn't fit inside the walls, so Yu Huai set up camp outside while I brought him and his officers into the city. He'd started calling me Grand Marshal. The moment he handed over the command token, the chain of command was set. Me on top, Yin Xiu as deputy, everyone else below. The logistics were terrifying. Feeding 100,000 mouths every meal would have bankrupted any normal lord. But the system had given me almost 100,000 stone of grain as a reward, so I had the supply. Nobody needed to know where it came from. Through Yu Huai, I identified the 100 or so spies the King of Chu had planted in the army. Easy enough to deal with when the time came. For the next 2 days, I visited the field kitchens at every mealtime, pretending to inspect the cooking. What I was really doing was slipping crushed Tiger Yang pills into the massive pots. The dose was small when split among so many men, but even diluted, it worked. By the third day, soldiers who'd been half dead from starvation were completing 2-hour training sessions without breaking a sweat. The change was so dramatic that men started whispering about it. Some thought it was the white rice. Others couldn't explain it at all. Yu Huai noticed too and reported it to me, puzzled. Yin Xiu and I just smiled and told him good food and good rest could work wonders. He didn't push it, but I could see the gears turning behind his eyes. After 3 days away, I finally went home. My wives swarmed me the moment I walked through the door, worried sick since I'd forgotten to send word. I felt a pang of guilt. Soon I'd be leading armies into battle, and these moments of peace would become rare. 2 days later, the scouts brought the news I'd been waiting for. 5,000 barbarian soldiers under a commander named Liang Dynasty had left Rome Prefecture and were heading for Xing County. They'd arrive within 3 days. This was it. I gathered all the officers in the command hall and made the call. Today is the day. All forces assemble outside the city. The drums and gongs rang out across the camps. 100,000 men formed up in massive formations outside the walls. Yin Xiu and I stood on the city wall looking down at our army. It felt like watching history being written. I drew my sword and pointed it at the sky. My voice, powered by everything the pills had given me, rolled across the formations like thunder. The old dynasty failed. The barbarians run wild. Our homeland bleeds. Today, we fight, not for kings or nobles, but for every ordinary person trying to survive in this broken world. We will take back our land and crush anyone who stands in the way. I declare, from this day forward, in the name of all our people, we rise. The old heaven is dead. A new heaven shall stand. The great era begins today. 100,000 voices echoed my words back. The old heaven is dead. A new heaven shall stand, like thunder rolling across the land. It went on for minutes. I'd borrowed the famous rebellion cry from my old world's history, and it hit just as hard here. This was the moment everything changed. I was the first person in this world to raise a banner with the common people's name on it. I knew what I was up against. 2,000 years of feudal power, noble houses, warlord families, corrupt officials, all tangled together like roots underground. But I had the system, and soon I'd have millions of ordinary people behind me. First order of business, appointments. Yin Xiu became deputy marshal. Yu Huai got the rank of senior general. Uncle became vanguard commander. My 5 centurions and all the officers below them received promotions and guaranteed pay. In grain, since I had mountains of it. The cheers were deafening. But I noticed the king of Chu's 100-odd spies in the crowd going pale, whispering to each other about reporting my rebellion. They'd never get the chance. I assigned 4 of my 5 top centurions to border defense. Yi took 10,000 men east. Zhu Ying took 10,000 west. Wang Ming and Zhua Tingyan each took 10,000 south. I armed each force with 3,000 crossbows, 300,000 bolts, plus spears, swords, and shields. With those weapons and the mountain passes as natural barriers, even if the king of Chu sent 300,000 men, he couldn't break through quickly. The 5th champion, Lin Xinji, I kept at my side as deputy vanguard. He was the most talented of the group, and I wanted him where I could train him personally. After border assignments, I had about 60,000 men left, 50,000 actual fighters plus support. I burned through nearly all my million-plus accumulated points re-equipping the entire army from the system shop, 2,000 fully armored heavy cavalry, 10,000 crossbow troops, and tens of thousands of spearmen, swordsmen, and shield-bearers. Every last point well spent. Then I sent my elite soldiers ahead to silently eliminate the barbarian scouts on the road. No warnings would reach the 5,000 enemy troops marching toward us. I stood before the army one final time. 5,000 barbarians are heading our way. What do we do? Every man gripped his new weapon and roared the same word. Kill. The war horns sounded. I led my northern expedition force out of the gates and onto the road. Yin Xiu rode beside me, grinning like a man reborn. He said he hadn't felt this alive since fighting alongside his father on the northern frontier years ago. By the next evening, we'd reached a town 30 miles from the enemy camp. My advanced scouts confirmed the barbarians had stopped to cook dinner, completely unaware their forward scouts were all dead. I gave the orders. Uncle and Lin Xinji would lead 2,000 heavy cavalry in a shock charge straight into the enemy camp, flying the king of Chu's banners to maximize confusion. Yu Huai would follow with 3,000 light cavalry to mop up any survivors. Not a single barbarian would escape tonight. The attack went exactly as planned. While the barbarians were sitting down to dinner, my advanced scouts had already killed all their forward lookouts. By the time their commander Wu Liangtai noticed something was wrong, it was too late. Uncle led the charge with the elite guard at the front. Over 100 silver-armored warriors, every one of them at least second-rate general level after the pills and training. They smashed into the enemy camp like a battering ram. Behind them came Lin Xinji and 2,000 fully armored heavy cavalry. The impact was devastating. Rows of soldiers were flattened instantly. The barbarians never even had time to form up. Wu Liangtai didn't even try to fight. The second he heard heavy cavalry, he grabbed a handful of bodyguards and ran, abandoning his soldiers, his officers, even his wives. Yu Huai swept in with 3,000 light cavalry from both flanks, forming a massive ring around the shattered enemy. Within 3 charges, it was over. The barbarians threw down their weapons and surrendered. The system confirmed the kill quest complete. 500 acceleration cards, 500 Tiger Yang pills, 50,000 points. I arrived with the main force shortly after and tightened the encirclement. About 3,000 prisoners. I asked if their commander was among them. A trembling officer told me Wu Liangtai had fled before the first blow was struck. Pathetic. I sent a squad of my best riders on fresh horses to chase him down. I rode around the prisoners and noticed most were actually Chinese soldiers who'd been forced to serve under the barbarians after their cities fell. Only a few hundred were actual foreign troops. I offered the Chinese soldiers a choice: surrender and join me. Every one of them dropped to their knees immediately. The system rewarded me again. Over 2,000 more troops, grain, cards, pills, and points. I had Yu Huai fold them into our ranks. That left the few hundred barbarian prisoners. They started yelling about being treated according to the rules of war, citing the old Liang Dynasty's tradition of releasing prisoners and even paying reparations to the enemy. They actually looked proud of themselves. I felt my blood boil. These were the same people who'd slaughtered civilians, enslaved women, and burned cities across our homeland. And now they wanted courtesy? You want me to treat you well? Like you treated our people? Fine. I'll give you the same treatment. I ordered Uncle to lead the heavy cavalry back in, but this time, no weapons. Just horses. They rode through the prisoners again and again, trampling them under iron hooves. The screaming lasted half an hour. When it stopped, not one barbarian was left alive. The Chinese soldiers who'd just surrendered watched in silence, shaking. But I could see it in their eyes, relief, even satisfaction. These barbarians had destroyed their homes and families. Nobody mourned them. All that remained was a group of the barbarian officers' wives huddled together, plus about 500 captured warhorses. Yu Huai asked what to do with the women. I glanced at them. I don't like wasting things. Give them to the men as rewards. Good news arrived at dawn. My elite squad had chased Wu Liangtai through the night and caught him. His bodyguards who resisted were all killed. 2 of my men got seriously wounded, though. These barbarian warriors were genuinely tough. I fed both injured soldiers a tiger yang pill each and had them carried to safety. As long as they were breathing, the pills would save them. I rewarded every man on the mission with pills. Some swallowed theirs immediately for the power boost. Others wrapped them carefully in cloth and saved them. They understood these pills were basically a second life in an emergency. Then I had Wu Liangtai dragged before me. He was tied up and cursing nonstop, still acting superior even as a prisoner. I ordered my guards to slap him until his face swelled like a melon. 2 teeth flew out, but he kept spitting insults. I asked him about Rome Prefecture's troop numbers and deployments. He refused to talk. I had them chop off 2 fingers. He screamed in his native tongue and cursed my ancestors. I hadn't really expected him to cooperate. I was taking Rome Prefecture regardless. We marched for 2 more days. By the second evening, Yin Xiu told me we'd entered Ning County territory. 20 miles ahead was Lingshui Pass, a fortified gate built into the mountains, the main route into Rome Prefecture. It was a natural choke point, steep terrain on both sides, impossible to go around without climbing dangerous peaks. Just then I noticed birds scattering from a nearby forest. Yin Xiu caught it too. I sent a few of my enhanced soldiers to investigate. They moved through the rough mountain terrain like it was flat ground. Moments later, clashing steel, 2 screams, and my men came back dragging 2 camouflaged scouts. They were Chinese soldiers from the Lingshui Pass garrison. I reset their dislocated arms myself, then gave them one chance to talk honestly or die. They chose wisely. The pass had about 2,000 defenders, roughly 40% barbarian. The system immediately posted a quest. Take Lingshui Pass, defeat 2,000 enemies. Reward: 200 acceleration cards, 200 pills, 20,000 points. 2,000 men behind fortress walls could be costly to storm head-on. But I had a better idea. I told the scouts I was leading the king of Chu's vanguard army on a northern expedition to drive out the barbarians. I asked if they'd be willing to go back inside and convince their Chinese comrades to open the gates from within. They looked at my army, tens of thousands of well-equipped soldiers, the Chu King's banner flying high, and made their decision fast. They dropped to their knees. General, our brothers inside have suffered under barbarian cruelty for too long. We'll go back and convince our commander to open the gates for you. I sent the 2 scouts back with my terms. Anyone who surrendered would receive the same pay and food as my own soldiers. They had good reason to believe me. Life under barbarian rule had been miserable for the Chinese garrison troops everywhere. The barbarians took the best food, the best quarters, and the best weapons for themselves. Chinese soldiers got the scraps and the night watch. Even worse, rumors were spreading that the new barbarian emperor planned to force all Chinese people to shave their heads and wear foreign hairstyles and clothing, an insult so deep. It had already triggered riots in some areas. For a people raised on the principle that your body and hair are sacred gifts from your parents, this was worse than conquest itself. The scouts slipped back into the pass using an urgent intelligence report as their cover, then went straight to the Chinese garrison commander, a man named Zhu Quan. They told him everything: Tinwine troops, heavy cavalry, all branches equipped, and the 5,000 barbarians sent to reinforce Xing County already wiped out. Zhu Quan went white. He had no real choice. Even if he sent for help, the nearest county had nothing that could stop my army. It was surrender or die. He agreed to open the gates at midnight. The plan was simple. Nighttime guard duty was always handled by Chinese soldiers while the barbarians slept or went out hunting for women to abuse. Zhu Quan would quietly alert his officers, and when the time came, they'd swing the gates wide open. That evening, as Zhu Quan walked past the barbarian barracks, he heard women crying and screaming inside. More civilians dragged in from the surrounding area. His fists clenched. These animals had been doing this every night since they arrived. Tonight would be the last time. The scouts brought back confirmation. I rewarded them with promotions and folded them into my ranks. Then I let everyone rest while we waited for midnight. I dozed off and had a ridiculous dream about conquering the entire world, building a palace with thousands of beautiful women from every nation. I was really enjoying it when Uncle shook me awake. It's almost time. I assembled the cavalry. Uncle would lead 2,000 riders. The moment the gates opened, they'd pour through and surround any resistance. The rest of the army would follow in formation. We moved to within 3 miles of the pass and waited. Less than 15 minutes later, fires appeared on the fortress walls, the signal. I kicked my horse and charged. Follow me. Thousands of hooves thundered toward the pass. As we approached, the massive gates swung open. On the walls above, Chinese officers waved their banners and shouted in unison, "Welcome, Grand Marshal." The gates are open. The gates swung open and we poured in. My cavalry surrounded the barbarian barracks before most of them even woke up. A few stumbled out half-dressed, saw thousands of torches and armored riders, and froze. One barbarian walked out still pulling up his pants, started cursing about the noise, then went silent when he saw what was waiting. Zhu Quan and his 1,500 Chinese soldiers knelt before me. The system rewarded me instantly: more grain, cards, pills, and points. The barbarian commander finally understood what had happened and screamed betrayal at Zhu Quan. I didn't even look at the barbarians. They were already dead in my eyes. I told Zhu Quan to handle them. His face lit up like a man who'd been holding his breath for years. He waved his men forward, and they fell on the barbarians like a dam breaking. Most of the enemy didn't even have weapons. They'd been caught sleeping or worse. The Chinese garrison soldiers unleashed years of pent-up fury. Some kept hacking at corpses long after they were dead, cursing them for every insult, every stolen sister, every humiliation. The whole camp turned red. I watched quietly from my horse. These men had needed this. Lingshui Pass was mine without losing a single soldier. The system confirmed the quest complete. I also picked up another 100+ war horses from the enemy supplies. Zhu Quan immediately volunteered to lead the advance on Ning County, just 20 miles behind the pass. He knew the Chinese officers there personally and was confident he could talk them into opening the gates. The system posted 2 new quests, one for defeating the garrison, another for capturing the county and its 28,000 civilians. The combined rewards were massive. I wanted to rush forward, but my men had been marching hard for days. I ordered everyone to rest overnight. I found a spot, lay down, and drifted back into that ridiculous dream about world conquest and a palace full of women from every nation. Next morning we marched on Ning County. When their garrison saw our army formations stretching across the plain, tens of thousands of troops with full cavalry, crossbows, and heavy infantry, they couldn't believe their eyes. The barbarian commander panicked and sent a rider to Rome Prefecture for help, but that was at least 10 days away. Zhu Quan rode to the walls and called out to his old friends by name. He told them the king of Chu's army had entered Shu territory, that the barbarians' days were numbered, and that anyone who surrendered would get 2 meals a day and monthly pay. The Chinese soldiers on the walls started whispering excitedly. Even the barbarians could see their garrison was about to crack. The barbarian commander ran along the walls threatening to kill the families of anyone who surrendered. It had worked before. Not today. Zhu Quan sweetened the deal from below. The marshal says 100 stone of grain for every barbarian head. He drew his sword and charged. I raised my hand. The war drums thundered, and our entire army surged forward. Up on the walls, the Chinese officers looked at each other, looked at the unstoppable wave of soldiers rushing toward them, and made their choice in a heartbeat. Screw it. Let's do this. They drew their swords, turned on the barbarians, and led 1,000 men in an attack from inside the city walls. The gates were as good as open. The Chinese soldiers inside the city turned on the barbarians the moment their officers gave the word. But it wasn't easy. Even outnumbered, the barbarian fighters were stronger and better equipped. The Chinese troops got pushed back on the walls. Down at the gate, our allies tried desperately to open it, but the barbarians held firm. Outside, Zhu Quan reached the gate first, but couldn't break through. I told everyone to move aside. Something had been changing inside me. Weeks of daily pills had built up a strange energy in my core. What Yin Xiu later told me was true qi, the mark of a grandmaster warrior, someone beyond even the super first-rate level, a realm most people only heard about in legends. I raised both hands toward the gate. The air between my palms rippled visibly. Everyone around me went dead silent, staring. I slammed one palm into the massive wooden doors. The explosion shook the ground. A wall of dust and debris erupted. When it cleared, the gate was simply gone, shattered into splinters. The barbarians who'd been bracing it from behind were reduced to scattered body parts. A single palm strike had obliterated everything. Nobody moved for several seconds. My own soldiers were terrified. The Chinese defenders inside the city, who'd been preparing to charge the gate again, found themselves staring through a gaping hole at piles of remains where their enemies had stood moments ago. I charged through the opening. Kill! My army poured into the city behind me. Up on the walls, the Allied soldiers cheered. Reinforcements had arrived just in time. Then my elite guard joined the fight on the ramparts. 50 silver-armored warriors leaped up the walls in their heavy plate, like gravity meant nothing. They crashed into the remaining barbarian defenders, and it was over in minutes. 600 barbarians against 50 of my enhanced soldiers. Complete slaughter. The Chinese defenders watched in awe. Every one of my guards was at least first-rate general level now. The system confirmed both quests complete, the military victory and the county capture. Combined rewards: nearly 3,000 acceleration cards, 3,000 Tiger Yang pills, and close to 300,000 points. The surviving Chinese officers, Liu Yang and Wang Tong, led their 800 remaining soldiers in surrender. More system rewards poured in. I rode into the city at the head of my army with strict orders passed down the line. No one touches a single civilian. Violators executed on the spot. The city was dead quiet. Every door was shut, every window closed. People were hiding, terrified. I summoned the county magistrate, an elderly man named Zhang Xingji, who came trembling and dropped to his knees. I helped him up and told him we weren't invaders. We were the people's own army. I asked him to prepare a full accounting of the county's finances and grain stores. Then I gave Zhu Quan and Wang Tung their next orders. Search every barbarian household in the city. All foreign males, regardless of age, executed. Female family members sent to the military camps. All property seized. This was the pattern I intended to repeat across every city we took. The barbarians had shown no mercy to our people. They would receive none from me. My soldiers searched every barbarian household in the city. The haul was staggering. Boxes upon boxes of gold, silver, and valuables piled into a small mountain worth at least 200,000 strings of cash. All stolen from Chinese civilians during the invasion. I seized everything and gave half to the troops as a reward. That evening, the county magistrate hosted a banquet. The local wealthy families and officials fell over themselves trying to flatter me. But I learned from Liu Yang that these same people had been even more eager to please the barbarians when they'd arrived, showering them with gifts, women, and becoming willing collaborators who helped oppress their own people. I had someone quietly record every name. Their time would come. Back at camp, one of my officers brought in a captured barbarian woman, the daughter of the slain barbarian commander, about 17 or 18, beautiful but wild. She was tied up and screaming about how her people would destroy us all. I slapped her across the face to shut her up, then leaned close and took a sniff. The stench was unbearable. I waved her away, told the soldiers to take her and do whatever they wanted. She was more insulted by my disgust than anything else. That night the camp was lively. The soldiers had earned their rewards. Meanwhile, the civilians of Ning County spent a terrified night expecting the worst: looting, assault, the usual horrors that came with any army entering a city. But morning came and nothing had happened. Not a single civilian door had been broken down. People cautiously crept outside and found official notices posted everywhere, announcing that this army only targeted barbarians and would never harm Chinese civilians. At first, people were skeptical. Every army said that. But then someone noticed the name on the proclamation, Lu Qian, the same name from the stories about Qing County, the warrior with the ancient beast who'd defeated thousands and taken in refugees. People started connecting the dots. Excitement spread through the streets. Over the next few days, my reputation became the hottest topic in the city. I donated 5,000 stone of grain from my system reserves to refill the county's empty government granary. The old magistrate Zhang Xingji nearly wept with gratitude. He'd been quietly panicking about a famine for weeks. He immediately posted recruitment notices. With generous military pay, daily food, and a commander people actually trusted, volunteers flooded in. 2,300 men signed up in days. The system rewarded me for every one of them. But while we were building momentum, the barbarian messenger who'd escaped Ning County had been riding nonstop for 2.5 days. He arrived at Rome Prefecture's gates barely able to stand and stumbled into the governor's office screaming, "The Chu King's army has invaded. Qing County has fallen. Ning County is surrounded." The messenger I'd failed to catch at Ning County had ridden nonstop for 2.5 days to reach Rome Prefecture. He burst into the governor's office screaming about invasion. The garrison commander, Liang Dynasty, was mortified. He'd just been reassuring a visiting inspector that everything was peaceful. That inspector was Wuliang Qiner, a 20-year-old woman who happened to be the daughter of the entire Wuliang Ha tribal chief. She was no bureaucrat. She was a warrior who'd fought on the front lines during the invasion of Shu, with skills approaching the super first-rate level. She'd earned her position through blood, not family connections. She demanded answers. When she heard we had at least 50,000 troops and had already taken 2 positions, her expression turned cold. She glared at her uncle, the garrison commander, who dropped to one knee begging forgiveness. She told him to focus on solutions instead. Wuliang Dynasty sent an emergency message via trained eagle to the provincial capital, then mobilized every soldier in the prefecture. He had 30,000 of his own barbarian troops, including 7,000 elite cavalry, plus 20,000 Chinese conscripts he considered worthless. He was confident. In his mind, no Chinese army could stand against barbarian riders. After all, they'd crushed the 200,000-strong Shu army easily enough. The entire force marched toward Rome County, the midpoint between us. The inspector rode with them. On my end, I'd finished cleaning up Ning County and was heading for the same destination. The day we departed, the streets were lined with civilians who'd come out to see us off. That told me everything. We'd won their hearts. Momentum was building. 3 days into the march, my scouts reported that barbarian banners were already flying over Rome County. The enemy had gotten there first and reinforced the garrison. The decisive battle for Rome Prefecture would happen sooner than expected. Yin Xiu and Yu Huai looked concerned. I stayed calm. I'd anticipated this. The barbarians in Rome Prefecture could field maybe 50,000 total. The provincial capital was over 1,000 miles away with slow communications. No reinforcements could arrive for at least 20 days. This would be settled between what we had right here. The system confirmed it with 2 new quests: defeat the 50,000-man army and capture Rome County with its 31,000 civilians. The combined rewards were enormous. Over 8,000 acceleration cards, 8,000 Tiger Yang pills, and 800,000 points. I'd built my heavy cavalry up to 5,000 armored riders by spending every last point I had. My soldiers had been secretly enhanced with pills mixed into their food for weeks. We were ready. I ordered the army to double their pace. We'd reach Rome County by tomorrow afternoon. This was the battle that would decide everything. Win here, and the entire prefecture falls. Lose, and the uprising dies before it starts. There was no option but to win.